You're good.
All right. So I'll call the meeting to order. I've got 6:32 p.m. It looks like we've got everybody from the subcommittee here. So looking at the agenda, we had a little mix up in a copy and paste from the last agenda since we already elected the vice chair, and she so kindly offered to take the minutes as well. Thank you, Linda. I think we can skip over that unless anybody disagrees. So the next item is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of December 16th, 2020.
So moved.
All right. Anybody want a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the minutes? Anybody have any issues with them? I did look over them as I was coming up with the agenda. I didn't see any issues, so seeing no other discussion, I'll start the vote. Linda?
Yes.
Krista?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so they pass unanimously. All right, I gotta keep shuffling to the agenda. So this is a little bit left over from the last time, the discussion of subcommittee functions and duties. I didn't get a chance to put together a document that kind of lays out what the role of this subcommittee is fully, but I will try to get that done for the next meeting, so that we can bring it forward and then discuss it from there. If anybody has any specific items they think should be included in that, feel free to email them to me, and then I can include them in the document and then bring it up for discussion for everybody. One thing I did want to mention as part of this is, I know the full committee and different subcommittees work differently. The way I write the agendas and have really looked at it, as we look at the agenda, we've got those big header topics that are have the Roman numerals. Those are the topics that we're discussing. Any bullet points under that aren't meant to restrict the discussion, but they're key points that either I saw or someone else brought up to me that we really should discuss under there. And it gives people a chance to be like, oh yeah, that I definitely need to look into, or I have an opinion on that. I want to bring it up. But again, just as long as it fits within that header topic, I pretty much feel it's open for discussion. We do have several items. It's a pretty full agenda tonight. I don't want to go too late. It is a nice vacation week. But this is the first meeting since we've been back at hybrid, and there are some really key things I want to hit on today. Chances are we won't quite get into the policies, but again, I do want to have a meeting really soon, and we'll try to just focus on policies. So I'll try to get Randy to send out an invite looking within the next week or two, probably 2 weeks if possible, to do that next meeting and then follow up shortly after that with another regular meeting. That's it. So that's all I had. Anybody else have anything on functions and duties? Nope. All right. Oh, go ahead, Dan. Your face was covered by the agenda, so feel free to just speak up. You're on mute.
And I should be the one who should be more sensitive to that. Adam, as you look to schedule another meeting in the future, just an FYI, I'm sure Rebecca or Randy would tell you this, we begin our road show next week with the town. So we've got a couple of meetings in the next couple of weeks. So just wanted to, make you aware of that. That's all.
Okay. yeah, so we'll definitely be scheduling around that. I mean, that's pretty critical. So, yeah, thanks, Dan. All right. So moving on to the public address system at the high school. This is something I know Member Brown had brought up to me and wanted on the agenda. Just to discuss it, I know there were some issues so that bells and announcements weren't necessarily being heard in part of the building. Has that either been addressed or is it being addressed?
It's being addressed, Adam, and to the committee. Just real quick, we do have an initial quote. It's approximately $13,600. Unfortunately, the vendor that we get the quote from is not on any public procurement document, like a state contract or mass higher ed. And so Jim Cavell, our facility director, has reached out to a couple providers, just hasn't received a quote yet. But we're ready to rock and roll. I just, as you well know, that's something under 30B. From 10,000 to 49,999. I just need to get 3 written quotes, and just waiting on 2 others. And the intent was, Adam and other folks here, we were looking to get that work started this week, aside from the value. So once we get that, we'll just work out a time and we'll make it happen. But it's, I guess, full steam ahead or almost full steam ahead, if you will.
Okay.
It's on the docket, and the money's there within the high school budget to address it.
Okay. And you have a pretty good idea of what the issue is and how to fix it? Whoa. They have a good idea of what the issue is and how to fix it?
Yep. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I could add to that. So the system essentially is proprietary, meaning the rights to it are owned by a company. That company is no longer, the parent company is no longer in business. So they're having to go to somebody else that can sort of get it up and running. And that's the problem. That person at this point says that that card that's acting up cannot be repaired any longer. At this point, rather than continuing to throw bad money at this thing, we're looking to just upgrade the whole system, and that's what the 13,000 will do. It will allow us to have access like you'd expect to have it in any modern system, where you could get on it through a laptop or a computer and post messages and set up schedules and all that type of thing, rather than having to go in and have these old DOS commands put in there that set like times and all this other stuff. So its time has come. It's served us well. And that's kind of what slowed this thing down. Rather than just having something get repaired, we're actually replacing the system and upgrading it to something a little more modern. It's about half the building is what's impacted by this.
Okay. So I guess as we're moving forward, it may be a little too late in the game now, but are we looking to avoid the same issue at some point in the future by using a more open standard system or something where someone else could come in and fix it? Okay, good.
Yep. And I think long term, that's really where Wachusett's at. I think the way we've done business and set up systems in the past has served us well, but we've grown to a point now where some of these gotta have systems need to be up all the time, and we need somebody that understands all those nuances and can advise us as we move forward, such as a director of facilities, that type of thing. We're at that point where maybe we're a collection of schools, and now we're a district and need to be a high functioning district, especially in terms of our facilities. And that's what really this whole COVID thing has brought to light is HVAC's got to work, communications got to work, where we're going in the future. We got to have planned upgrades, those types of things. And we're really at that point. We've grown and matured as a district.
Okay. Yeah, Dan.
So to Bob's point, and I'll get into this when I talk about the 22 budget update. But you know, we've talked about this at our previous meeting, and we're moving forward with this, or, you know, I'll take 30 seconds, I promise. You know, we built it into the 22 budget. He's timing me.
Mike did it too.
You both did
All
it.
right, go ahead. You're wasting your time. Just go.
Wow, feeling the love here. Wow, it's only 6:42 as well. Come on, Krista. You know, we might as well join the crowd.
She'll save it for later.
She's gonna
You
say
got
it for later.
this. I'll ask some really detailed questions for you to get into later.
20 seconds.
It's in the 22 budget, where it's not a new position. It's an upgrade, if you will, of a current existing position. We've upgraded the salary, which we think is market rate, but maybe it's not. I guess we'll find out. And to Bob's point, you know, these are issues that have been ongoing, and you know, Bob's done yeoman work, you know, over the past summer and previous months to get all these mechanicals, if you will, you know, up to where they need to be. But with the right person, we won't hopefully find ourselves in the conundrum that we were this year with facilities. And just one more thing, Adam, if I may, into the
Yep.
committee. I sincerely believe, and I say this in all sincerity, I sincerely believe that moving forward, you know, if I'm here or not here, I don't know, that these meetings should be represented by the facility director and myself. That he and I should do a tag team. With all due respect to Daryl and to Bob, and I appreciate Bob being here and Daryl, but I think that you know, he and I would be doing the tag team and just going through all these issues. That is a key person who's not at these meetings here. But with the right guy, if I may, who's got the proper credentials, that can happen. And I said it only because in other districts that's been the arrangement. That you know, my facility guy is joined at my hip. And
Yep.
you know, when it comes time for budget or anything else, he gets into the technical stuff because he's good at that, if you will. And I get into the dollars and cents and the procurement part, and how we can put what is it, a square peg in a round hole, or you know, you get my point.
Yeah, I think
He or she. We mean he or she. That's what we.
I know. I'm sorry. Yes. Thanks, Bob. Feeling the love.
I think that's a good idea. We just need to make sure, you know, moving forward, the person that's in that position is also involved with the security aspect side of it, you know, with Daryl, so that they can speak to those items when they come up. So.
And absolutely.
I'll get
And
to you,
again, I'm sorry, Mike. This is 2 minutes now, probably. In a previous district, he and I, again, we worked hand in hand on a security project that was well over $300,000, and again, he provided the technical expertise, or at least he was the tactician, if you will, and I was the procurement guy and the finance guy. You know, how are we going to pay this thing and da da da. But
Right.
Absolutely, positively.
Okay, Mike, you've been waiting patiently.
So two things. One was I would just echo that, at least from my experience in the industry, when I do work at a school, it's very beneficial having a director of facilities. It can also work in the school's favor much better when it comes to bargaining prices and dealing with multiple contractors. It can really have someone that knows what they're doing. Is very, very beneficial. And my question for Bob would be about the upgrade to the PA system. Does that involve work having to be done in every room, or is that just to like the main part of it that controls the system?
It's using existing wiring, so it'll be minimal work that'll happen in each school. It's going to be a lot of the head end work and getting
Okay.
systems to use the existing wiring. And I believe there might be one or two areas that where they're going to have to address the wiring situation, but most of it is system work, buying the system, integrating it, and getting it up and running.
All right. Thank you.
And Adam, just for the committee, just a point of clarity, we do have an existing facility director. He's K through 8, if you will, and then there is one assigned to the high school. But we're looking to expand the role in terms of the responsibilities K through 12, and also his or her credentials as well. And when we do come back and we're sitting in the conference room or wherever we're sitting, again, he or she will be to my right or to my left. And you'll have to deal with the two of us. Mercy, as Ned Martin would say when he was commenting, play-by-play guy for the Red Sox. Mercy.
Linda, go ahead.
Just a quick question. So then the PA system, it's for the entire district would be getting this upgrade, not just the high school, or is it just the high school?
Just the high school.
Okay.
And right now, about half the high school, half the spaces in the high school are impacted. My apology if I said WRSD. I meant WRHS if I said that incorrectly earlier.
Yeah, I think you just meant to say classrooms and said schools.
Yep,
So,
thank
yeah.
you.
And when we get into the capital a little bit later on in the draft document that we have, there are one or two buildings where PA upgrade was built into it. It's not the wholesale project they have at the high school.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the public address system at the high school? Nope. All right. So the HVAC updates. I know Carolyn sent something out, but that encapsulates more than just HVAC. So I'll bring that up under the COVID-19 topic. But just a quick update on where we are with the HVAC. Are there anything still outlying or anything like that?
Bob, you want to jump in on that one?
Yep, I'm happy to do that. So we've done, we're at a point where we are now addressing units that are either have failed or are underperforming, that type of thing. The major work that we've done is in play. It's actually quite substantial to have literally well over 100 units identified when we first started to get guidelines on what it would take to get us back in person, to getting all those repaired and up to snuff and working has been quite an accomplishment. What we're doing right now is we're concentrating on, I've trained all the principals and the head custodians on using airflow meters. And I've created a spreadsheet that takes the airflow and some measurements we make within the room, the amount of vent area that's available, where the air comes out of the air handlers, and converts it into air changes per hour. And it uses the same process that the big document that we did, they used in that. So the headings on it, the units are all the same. The numbers are comparable as well. So custodians are going through, working with principals and myself. We're filling that in. We're looking for having the air changes per hour be 4 or above. And that we're measuring every space where adults exist and coming up with those numbers. Anything that's below 4, we're looking to try to work on that unit, increase the airflow to get it to that point. If it's something that's just below 4, let's say it's in the 2 to 4 range, while we're working on it, we're looking to provide additional air flow within that room. If it's below that, we're looking to relocate people out of that out of that area. So it's been quite substantial, and I think this is now our quality check on the other side of it to measure our work. One of the interesting things out of all this is our newest school, Mount View. When we were over there and we're measuring room after room, we're coming up with like 3.98 air changes per hour, 4.01, and that's that system. It was dialed in at 4, and it's within a few hundredths of being right at 4. So it was amazing in that room, as opposed to Carolyn works in the ECC, and we're over there, and one unit's at like 5, the next one's at like 18. So in that building, it was such variation, because those are some of our oldest units, as opposed to Mount View, where it's within a few hundredths each room was. So it's quite eye-opening to kind of go around and work with the principals and the custodians on this.
So how many systems are we I guess how many rooms affected are in that extremely low range? Where we're kind of moving people.
There's only a few. I've been pleasantly surprised that after we've done our initial work on the HVAC systems, that just about all the rooms are passing, and they're not just passing, they're passing quite substantially above 4. So that's really a good thing. I was most nervous about some of our oldest schools, and they seem to be fine as long as the motors in them hold up. And I think people would even share that. Maybe Carolyn could speak to that. They're turning so fast, there's actually more noise coming out of them than they're used to. It's like they're noticeable when you're in the room. You're like, wow, I can hear that thing running over there. So that's a good thing. There's only a few spots, and then we're zeroing in on those rooms. Some of them, one of them was ECC. We had to replace a motor in there and some bearings, and that's what we end up doing, is working on that. If we can't clean it out and adjust the damper to be a little bit wider, then we have to go in and look at the motors, bearings, those types of things.
Okay, Mike, you got a question?
I just was wondering if there's anything noteworthy as far as improvements or issues with comfort in the buildings as a result of the work that's done.
Maybe Carolyn could answer that for us, as someone who's living it, you know?
Sure, I'll talk about comfort. A big issue before was just these extreme temperature differentials, and I'm happy to report I'm not really hearing much about that. And I know at the ECC, they were working over a long period of time to get the thermostats calibrated, which has made a difference. And yeah, so I feel like a lot of these HVAC updates to get the air quality better is also making the temperature quality better. I do think that some people have chosen to keep windows open just for their own kind of peace of mind. But we're not seeing the huge, I have to have my air conditioner on because the heater's out of control thing that we used to.
All right, good to hear.
Yeah, that's real good, because I know the ECC had huge issues with temperature for years, so that's great.
That's one of the tricky things that came into play here. So it wasn't just bringing in more air from the outside, it was conditioning that air so that it wasn't just freezing out the room or on a hot day cooking the room. And the good news from that is, yeah, some of these long-standing issues of my room's always freezing, my room's always cooking, we've been able to address by fixing air leaks in the lines that go to all the thermostats, or putting new thermostats, or adjusting things. So it's actually, I think we're in a lot better shape than we have been in a long time, not just with air flow, but with the quality of the heat and all that stuff.
Good. All right, anything else? Anybody?
Oh,
Yeah, Linda.
I just wanted to add that it was a huge undertaking, and I'm really glad to hear that it's come so far that, you know, and I know that we talked about like the temperature, but there is some amount of that at play in terms of the room temperature in terms of transmission of the virus. And so having that under control is extremely important, and having these air changes, keeping it around 4. And that's great about Mount View. That's pretty great to have it in that tight little window. So I just wanted to commend you on that job. So thank you.
It was
definitely
a large effort by a lot of people, but giving the vision, finding some funds available, and that's to Dan's credit there, and managing and finding those, and just giving those marching orders. Let's get this done yesterday, and then having people jump in. A lot of work was done after hours, so we didn't inconvenience people, especially if we had to go above ceiling panels. So there were people that worked off shift, and it was quite a big undertaking. But I'm happy to see we're on the other side of it for the most part. There's still things that go down, and we still have to tweak things here and there, but we're in a much better shape than we were.
Yeah, Mike.
I'll let Dan go in a minute, but I was just wondering if we could put any sort of note or have this somehow, the positiveness of this mentioned during the regular school committee meeting, because I know a lot of people are constantly saying, "Oh, what about the HVAC? Have they done anything?" And this is a really great report to hear.
Well,
That
thank you. I mean, thank Bob. Bob, I'm going to say something. I'm going to get in my soapbox again, but since we're amongst friends, no, I'm serious. Bob is our deputy superintendent, and his job should be teaching and learning. And Bob, since the summer, has jumped into the fray. He has jumped into the deep end, and he does handstands around me in terms of some of these technical terms. He deserves, and Mike or Adam, whoever, Linda, Krista, he deserves the accolades for the work. And I'm not shortchanging Jim Cavello or any of the other guys, but Bob had the drive, if you will. There's an old expression, get on my back and let's go. And that's what he said. And Cavello and some others, jumped on his back, and in a metaphor, you get my point, to get the work done. Let's think about it for a second. Some of these, if not many of these challenges, were not just recent challenges, the past year or two. Adam, you've been around a number of years, all due respect. These have been ongoing challenges that have never been addressed through the budget process, for good, bad, or indifferent. That's all that I'm saying. And and we are addressing it this year, and not through the budget process either. I mean, I set up a COVID line, and it's in the undesignated appropriation. There's no money there. But we're, between Bob and myself and some others, we're either applying through FEMA or some other grants to make it happen. But Bob is the guy who you need to tip your cap to, and getting it done. And Carolyn is running away from me. She shut off her screen on me, but I think that she and her colleagues would echo the work that's been done. And I said it in all sincerity. I do.
Yeah,
I'm going to need
definitely.
another metaphor.
Go ahead, please. You have another metaphor? Go ahead.
No,
please.
I'm going to need another one. I know you have one.
Oh, for me? We're only on
This
item
is where
number.
Krista jumps in and gives you a hard time. No, I definitely agree, Dan. I mean, just from when we went on the tours of the schools, I mean, Bob knew inside and out. Like every room we walked into, he's like, "This is that. This is that." I mean, the breadth and depth of work and knowledge he's had to have to make it through this year on what I'm assuming are not areas of your expertise. I mean, your career hasn't been HVAC and buildings and systems and setups and all of that. So yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. It's
Thank you,
come
Bob.
so far. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you to everybody.
It has not been easy. There is no textbook out there that says everything you want to know in a pandemic but are afraid to ask.
Yeah.
That textbook doesn't exist. But I think
you're
the work
writing
that,
it.
you know what?
Yeah, you guys should write it.
In some respects, we are. But Bob accepted the challenge. And he kept me away from Jim Cavallo because we'd probably be killing each other. Too much information, but that's okay. So I appreciate that, Mike, and Adam, if you say something, again, Bob and Cavallo and Craig, and Adam, who's our carpenter, even though some things maybe haven't been smooth sailing, there's a heck of a lot that is getting done, because at the end of the day, this sounds kind of awkward, but our product, if you will, is our kids, and we're trying to enable and facilitate an environment that is best for our kids, because they only get one shot, one day, and then that's it. I sound like a politician. I don't really mean to be a politician.
Because you work in the district.
I'm speaking from the heart here. I'm serious.
No, I've known you long enough. I can definitely.
I'm just messing around, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
All right. Is there anything else on the HVAC side? All right. So moving on to the COVID-19 topic. The first thing, I guess, a current status on what we're seeing in the schools, and things like that. We'll get into the reopening side, the hybrid kids and remote kids and all that, but really what are we seeing COVID-19 transmissions, and our last meeting was middle of December through now. So
do you want to go to the dashboard, Bob?
We'll go there in a minute, Dan.
Okay. Yep.
Get us going with this. So what essentially happened was we geared up, brought everybody back in, and as expected, right from day one, we had exposures, and we've been sort of rebounding and dealing with that and trying to improve maybe some of our internal protocols, some of our requirements on distancing, all these types of things. It reached a peak maybe a few weeks ago. We're in 1 week, we had 2 days where we had more than 3 cases, and that's a lot. That's a lot to deal with. And it got to the point where at first you could keep track of, oh yes, that was this at that school, and we had 2 people with this. It just became a blur, and it was all hours of the day, weekends included. It got to be pretty intense. And I would say lately, it's died down over the last 2 weeks. It really has. And the week before vacation, it was not nearly what it had been before. It got a little blurry because we had 2 separate cases in central office, and so that still kept us really busy. But in reflecting on it over the break here a little bit last weekend, those were adults that were removed from the schools. So if I took those cases off my radar, we actually had a very quiet week leading up to our February break. So I would say that I think we had a hump where we had a lot of cases we dealt with that were school related, and I think it's come back down. It's starting to come down now, which is a good sign. I don't think it has a lot to do necessarily with us making huge changes. We've tightened things up. We've modified things. We've gotten schools more on the same page and shared a lot of things with each school. I think it has to do more with, I don't think there's quite as many cases that are active out there. And I think that's kind of part of it.
Mike, I know you had a question.
So when you're talking, what you're referring to right now, are you talking about in-school transmission or just cases in general?
Both.
Okay.
We definitely had a couple incidences, 3 or more, where there were in-school transmissions. We're pretty sure. We can't pin that down, and that's one thing when we work with the Board of Health, and we sort of talk about that. It's like, yeah, that looks like it could have been in-school transmission. Nobody has the time to really chase it down completely to say it absolutely was, because I talked to these people and they absolutely didn't go here. It seems like it could be, one person has it, and then a few days later, these 2 people that were in contact with that person have it. It's those types of things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Linda.
So that's one of the ongoing concerns I've had is about that tracking down and being able to clearly say one way or the other. I'm glad to see the downward trend. That's always a good sign. But I am curious about how, because of the reporting requirements, where if there's nobody in the school for a certain number of hours, then it doesn't count as a case to be reported. So that's where I was just kind of curious where that comes in with having back-to-back remote snow day and then remote Wednesdays. I guess I would just be a little bit cautious about being sure the spike is over, and not letting down guards. We still need the masking, we still need the spacing, all of the mitigation that we know can work. We need to make sure we stay consistent on.
Absolutely.
And then especially coming out of this vacation week where we don't know honestly, I think that it's like we want all the bad weather so everybody stays home. but just my real question though is about how those back-to-back remote days might impact what we actually see, especially since families don't have to have their students tested. They don't have to report anything to the school, correct? It's all voluntary when it's a student.
Any person that is tested, the Board of Health, and conversely our nurses, if it's a school-related student, can see the results, whether they're negative or positive. So even if somebody, like, let's say I had COVID and I go get tested and it's positive, or I feel sick, I get tested, it's positive, the Holden is notified, if I live in Holden. Therefore, they notify the schools in terms of the nurses if it's somebody that's at that school, a student or something like that. So we can see those things. So it's not quite as dependent on someone calling and saying, yeah, I got COVID, guys. We can see those things. The other thing that we try to work very closely with the Board of Health is to establish the onset of symptoms, and then we go back 48 hours before the onset of symptoms. So you're most likely to be able to pass it on or infect, or there's enough viruses present that they can now leave my body and go infect somebody else. When you have those symptoms, you go back 48 hours. They're saying that's a pretty safe bet that prior to that, I was not able to infect other people. So that's why we go back to 48 hours there. In terms of if a school is unoccupied for 48 hours, it doesn't mean anything really in terms of the people that have it or are considered a close contact. But what it does mean is if nobody's been present in that space for 48 hours, the viruses essentially, they're no longer able to infect people. They're saying after 48 hours, you can consider that the viruses are dead if nobody's been in there. So that's kind of why we look at a 48 hours an important period of time. If we were to have a Wednesday where no one was in the school, and maybe there was a snow day on a Tuesday, that essentially all the viruses in there should be dead within the school. We still spray and do those types of things, but it's also a good thing. Like if I was in a room and maybe I didn't quite spray on the side of this kid's desk or something, or on a corner of it, that helps us with the 48 hours. Does that help to answer your question? Or I'm not quite sure, Linda, what you were asking me.
Yeah, no, I just think that anytime that there's, I guess the main issue that I keep on looking at with the data and looking at what is going on are all of these holes that happen, not unique to Wachusett by any means, but just how the way that data is collected and when it's allowed to be missed is important in telling the whole story of what's happening. And that's all. I just wanted to make sure to see how that timeline works out, because we had 2 weeks in a row with that back-to-back remote days, and how that might play a part into how cases get tracked, how they get swept up into the tracking.
Dan, is your hand raised or is it left over from before?
Sorry about that. I forgot to
Nope. That's fine.
Phew.
All right, so I guess unless someone else has more comments, it kind of covers the. Oh yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I was just wondering if we could do like a shared screen and just look over the dashboard, because I just wanted, I'd appreciate the being able to ask questions while actively looking at it.
Yeah. Let me see. I don't think I can.
Adam, you doing it or?
Dan,
If someone else can do it, because I don't know how to work on a single screen anymore.
Trista does have her hand up as well.
I'm there. I've never done it with. Let me just fumble and stumble publicly with this on the internet.
Okay. I'll let Krista ask her question while you're stumbling and fumbling.
I'm gonna stumble and fumble through a question here because I don't even know if I can fully form it into a question. So what's kind of comforting me is that you said that you have reports from the entire town, and so you can see if grandma got infected, right?
the Board of Health can see that. We would not see it as a school district. So I don't want to have people that maybe are watching this be alarmed that what are those school people prying into? We could see if a student in one of our schools tested. We wouldn't see anything outside of that. We could see if a person that's employed in our school district is a positive or negative result.
I guess the gap for me then that kind of just still is feeling a little weirded out is the whole like asymptomatic thing, right? So even if like 3 kids in the school are hanging out, they all have COVID, they're asymptomatic, they're not getting tested, they're high-fiving each other and then like wiping their noses. I know they're trying not to do those things, but and then they go home and like grandma is sick a few days later, right? They're not going to be able to see that was spread at school because the kids were asymptomatic. And so I guess that's the gap that like there's no way for us to even measure for that, is there?
Well, I think the way that would be uncovered would be through more detailed someone investigating how did this spread, where did it come from, talking to the parents, talking to the grandkids and the grandparents, the parents, the kids, to try to uncover all that stuff. Unfortunately, boards of health don't have the staffing, and schools certainly don't have the staffing to be able to chase all that down. We rely heavily on our nurses and our principals to do the initial interview, and then they work with us, and we're sort of the quality control from central office. We make sure it's done sort of the same way every time. My biggest role in those is just to get people to slow down, because usually the meeting starts with, yeah, we investigate it, we know there's one close contact, and then I purposely act dumb. Well, hold on now. Tell me the name. Tell me the situation. Did you interview this? What about a study? What about the bathroom? Who sits next to them at lunch? So I purposely kind of slow things down because, and try to uncover a little bit more. The boards of health usually want to know, they know that we do a pretty good job of identifying the close contacts. So when we share the information with them, they might have some additional questions, but after sitting through and essentially teaching us how to do it over the first maybe dozen cases, they now kind of rely on us just to sort of pass it on to them that we've investigated pretty thoroughly, and here's our identified close contacts. I think that will always be a sort of a hole in the system. Now, what we do have in place, and I think what helps is that there's some pretty solid evidence that wearing a mask and consistent hand sanitizing are 2 of the biggest things you can do to knock this down. So even if I might be contaminated and I don't have symptoms, if I'm consistently wearing my mask in school, hand sanitizing, those are the 2 big things that we put into play and make sure are the same across schools as best as we can. We're constantly getting that message out to principals. After maybe we investigate an incident and we found out, wow, this got spread this way, or these guys weren't doing that. We share all that information out with principals. Make sure that when the adults are having lunch, that they're this distance apart, that they're facing in the same direction, those types of things. So that's how we're trying to approach this, is to be as safe as we can, is through those protocols and procedures. And you're right, Krista, there's always going to be those gaps. If someone's asymptomatic, oh my goodness, they could be sitting right across from me in that classroom, and
I know. And so that, and I'm not saying that we're not doing a great job, and the schools are really, really doing a great job. And everyone is, just trying so hard to stay, sanitized, right? But it does make me concerned that these numbers that we're seeing, right, are only the cases that we were able to confirm. And that could be 25 less than it actually is. But I know that that's not our fault. That's the whole, scary part of the virus, right? And there's really not much that we can do. But I think that it's important also that we just recognize that it's not that schools are necessarily a place where the virus is not spread. It's that we can't gather data to prove that it is a place that it's spread.
Yep.
So just making sure that everybody is, obviously still taking all the precautions that they're taking right now, but it's not a spreader, right? Because we all know that being in school is a spreader, regardless. But taking those precautions is going to make it a lot better for everyone. Don't just don't get lenient. For everyone listening, keep it covered.
Those are some good points. Thank you.
Linda, I believe you were next.
Oh, I just wanted to ask, and this might not be the right time to go into a longer discussion of this, but the updated CDC guidelines that came out last week actually pointed to a different set of two key mitigation tools. It was masking, that's the same, but that distance of at least 6 feet. That those are the two main ways to mitigate risk, mitigate spread. So I just wanted to put that out there in the public meeting to highlight that part of the updated guidance. And so I think the rest of it probably fits in another part of the agenda, but I just wanted to pipe up there. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Yep.
Yeah, Linda, I do want to talk a little bit more about the CDC stuff under safety issues, under hybrid. But we've brought up the dashboard, so I'll actually pull that up and let's look at that now. So Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, I don't want to fuel a fire like this is bring out emotions too much like a regular school committee meeting, but you can only do so much. You can only track the cases that are there. If someone's not sick and not affected and they don't spread it to someone else, it's not really a problem. Can only do so much.
So I just want to follow up on what you're saying and what Krista said and everybody else. There's an aspect of both, and there's also, from what I see, what is actually like a risk mitigation built in. If that student is asymptomatic, they're not showing something, they go home and someone in the home gets sick, then in most cases, at least I've heard of, pretty much everybody in the home is getting tested.
Well, that's another
so even if that person's asymptomatic, they will get tested, and if positive, it will get reported. So we're at least capturing a portion of it. It's not going to be everything. And I think we all understand that, but there is a little bit of that mitigation built in there. Linda, you just raised your hand.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry to do this because I know I agree, Mike, that wanted just keep things level, even keeled. But just one point of information, that there is not definitive proof that asymptomatic means a lower viral load that hasn't been determined. There has been good solid evidence that asymptomatic has the same kind of viral load as symptomatic cases, and so that they can spread it just as easily. It's not settled. They're still evaluating that evidence. So that's all. I just wanted to put that the science is not established on that yet.
Thank you. I
Sorry to
wasn't
get
saying
people
anything as to
emotional.
what I wasn't saying anything as to whether or not it can spread, but thank you for the clarification.
Okay. So we've got the dashboard up. One of the things, actually, if we can start at the top. So the total cases traced to exposure in a WRSD school. I know there was 1 week we saw that jump from, I think it was like 2 all the way up to the 8. And I know this was something that was brought up in some emails, and I've heard it talked around a little bit. So just from what I understand, a lot of that was related to one classroom. Is that correct? Bob or Dan? And
No, I'm trying to be a little careful here.
Yeah.
We have to protect people's privacy, and so we've had a couple of incidences, and maybe there's one in particular where there was exposure amongst adults, and it was contained to an initial single case that exposed other people, and therefore it kind of blossomed out. And what we have done, I will say this, Adam, without giving away any details here,
Yep.
if we suspect there's an in-school transmission from one kid to another adult, from adult to adult within the school, if we suspect that's where it happened, we automatically contact the Department of Education as well as the State Department of Public Health. And they then get involved we share the details with them. They then review what we've done and tell us whether that's acceptable or not. And they're the ones that are involved if we're going to close a classroom or a school or the district. They're the ones that give us advice on all those things. And we've done that for any time we've suspected there's been a in-school transmission. That's what we do. That's what we're being asked to do, and we're certainly following that to the letter.
Okay, and also to follow up with that, I mean, I fully understand how you have to talk around that a little bit. That number also hasn't changed since that week, because shortly after we came back. So in the last month, it's been at 8, I believe. Correct?
So what happens is if somebody gets COVID, they can return to work once they are symptom-free for at least 24 hours. First, they have to have no fever, and then they have to be symptom-free for 24 hours. So in some cases, it's kind of a pain to beat this thing. It lingers on for certain people a lot longer than for others. And it could be that it's just my system can't fight it as well, or it could be maybe I get a different strain. And it's just a bear to beat this one. So that's what's in play here as well. So what we typically do is we let people know that that's the case, and then we'll check in with them kind of periodically. How you doing? What's up? And in some cases, we'll even set a date of return. Okay, so you're feeling good today. If you're fine, then we'll say you can come back on Friday. We give them a day or two and say you can come back on Friday, provided you've been symptom-free, over the interim time, those types of things. So that's how we kind of approach it. It's a multi-tiered thing. Our HR department is the one that reaches out to people. Brendan and myself are the ones that reach out to the Department of Public Health and kind of work that. Daryl was involved in reaching out to the Department of Education along with Brendan to get those things all set up. So it's a multi-tiered approach that we do. It involves quite a few different people. It's not one person making the call here and preventing someone from coming back. And ultimately, in all these cases, the one that has the authority is the local Board of Health. So if they tell us, look, in this situation, because of how something went down, this person can't come back till this date, that's the date, and we abide by that. So it's kind of complex at times.
Mike, I see you have a hand up. And then Linda.
Really trying not to get this to drag on too long, but I want to make sure I fully understand things. So trying to fully understand the process and, of course, the what ifs. But so say you have a case, and of course, I know the district doesn't require testing. So the criteria to allow a student to return is that they've been symptom-free for 24 hours, and that's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what would happen is if you were COVID positive, Mike, and you were feeling really, really bad, if you went and got a test, you're going to test positive. The thing is, are you now able to be without symptoms for 24? And that's coming from the Department of Public Health. That's not us in any way saying that's
okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. It would be different, Mike, if you were a close contact. Let's say I had it and you and I were in a classroom together and you were identified as a close contact. And let's say you didn't have any symptoms. We would then tell you that let's wait a few days so that if you had a virus, it's going to manifest itself. And then usually about 4 days in, or 5 days in, you can go get a test. If it's negative, you can be back to work on the 8th day. So that's the way that you, as a close contact with no symptoms, could come back. And that's how we set up the date of return. If you chose not to have a test at all and you were still symptom-free, after 10 days, we're allowing people to come back in. It used to be 14.
Thank you, and I appreciate you explaining all of this. I'm sure I know you live this day in and day out, so
yeah,
it can be a bit much.
With some people being angry or crying, and oh my goodness, this is not not something you want to do. Is have these conversations with people.
Linda, yes. I was trying to call.
Sorry, I'm like, what are the protocols here? So I had asked this last week actually, because I was looking at the state spreadsheets of districts reporting cases, and I noticed that ours didn't line up with the states. We had even a conservative, because the reporting periods are different. So even if you kind of give everything the benefit of the doubt, they're still off. I think we had the equivalent of 18 cases and the state had 11 for our district. Has that discrepancy been figured out? Why? Is it just a lag that their spreadsheets don't catch up on, or are we okay? I feel like we're doing a good job for our community having this dashboard up, but in terms of making sure the state has good data to work with,
I can't
any idea there?
I can tell you this: the local boards of health are always telling us, updating us. Yes, in Rutland, for instance, in the town of Rutland, we have this many cases, and if you look on the state website, it's not the same. So I don't know where the disconnect is. I know that on our dashboard, these are every single one that we've interviewed and determined that this is what it is, and we've gotten results back that this person is positive. So that's all based off of the information we receive. I don't know what the disconnect is. I don't.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions on the dashboard? Either in general or specifics? Mike, go ahead.
So just trying to fully understand, and I know it might be right in front of me. So are these all cases in the district total, or what's the difference between just the cases counted and the in-school transmission on the dashboard?
We haven't, because it's not something you can measure and say, yes, there's proof positive it was in-school transmission. That doesn't show up anywhere, any count of in-school transmissions. Also, what's not on this are the close contacts, because there's no real determining factor. Sometimes when we meet with the Board of Health, they'll be saying, "Oh, that's not a close contact," and we'll say, "Yeah, but in a preschool classroom, you know, the kids and this, and they're kind of, you're all over them. You're much closer than that for longer. We feel we should have it." And sometimes they'll say, "All right, then count that as a close contact." So there's not a list of close contacts. We could do that, but I mean, there's not a hard and fast thing that met these qualifications. Absolutely is a close contact, because schools are a little different, I think, than the work environment. With adults, it's a little bit more cut and dry. When we interview just adult to adult sort of situation, we use the thing of, were you closer than 6 feet for 10 minutes or more in total out of a day, out of 24 hours? And the adults can usually, yeah, I was. We were both at the photocopier, and I talked about this, and it was about probably 10 or 12 minutes. And with kids in there, sometimes you're interjecting on this, you're helping that, you're redirecting, and it's really hard with kids to get a feel for that.
The reason for me asking is because it says total number of, if you could scroll down a little bit, the wording on it. A little bit more. Because the wording is number of cases of in-school exposure, not in-school cases. That's what threw me off a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I can work with Brendan to get that changed. Yeah, I don't know why those words were used. Can't speak to it.
And can we go back up to the top real quick, please? Yeah, because then it says total cases traced to exposure in WSD school, which would be 8, which I would assume meant in school transmission. I just appreciate if that could be, I don't mean to be a stickler, but just establish the differences.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I had two things. One, I am really glad to hear that when you're doing the contact tracing, that you're not just assuming that these kids are fixed little pins on a board, but are more like marbles rolling around in chaotic patterns. I'm very glad to hear that acknowledgement in your process. And then my question though is about if it's possible to include in some way, even if it's just for the school committee and not public, on the dashboard, some way to show what how many people are quarantining or who should be in the schools but aren't due to COVID. So not like cohort A, B on their off days, but you know, this classroom was supposed to be in session, or 3 kids were supposed to be, I mean, it doesn't even have to be kids versus adults, but some way to show that, you know, there was something, you know, the case that happened at the high school, and now we have to have, you know, there were going to be 10 teachers in, but now they're at home, or it's something like that, or like this classroom was supposed to be in person, but now it has to be run remotely. Some kind of way to visualize that, I think, would be really helpful to understand what the impact is on the kids' education, and just in terms of kind of weekly life during COVID. And I think it would also help kind of track what kind of remediation might need to happen in the future for disruptions to education from this year. But even just in the short term, I know that that's a lot of data. That's a lot to be presenting back in some form. But I think it would help the committee, at minimum, the committee, if not to the larger community, have a better picture of what hybrid requires, what kind of flexibility hybrid requires of our entire community. I don't know if that's possible.
Linda, can I ask a follow-up question real quick before you answer, Bob? I just want like some clarity, because what I'm hearing, and it might be a good idea, is like every one of those people, like it says one person, but how many people did that actually equal that it affected that had to stay home because of the one? So one doesn't always just equal one person staying home. That equals, maybe like 7 people having to stay home. Is that what?
So
Bob?
that, but also, like you were saying about the date of return. So there's going to be overlap there too. Whereas someone might look at that one that's out and say, well, that one will return in 2 weeks, but that's not a given. And then the kind of overlap from there, that one case does cause 2 weeks minimum of disruption, right? Or 8 days minimum.
So if I understand, Bob's not here to kick me under the table. But no, seriously, I think what you're asking, okay, let's just talk about central office for a second. One person out impacted 10 people being out. There's your answer. That's what you're looking for?
Right.
Yes,
Well, that's what I'm asking.
And I hope I didn't break any rules by saying that, but.
Yeah, that's exactly
you know what,
I
and
think.
you know what, I think we need to leave it at that. But and I'm not trying to skirt your question, Linda, but you read it from Daryl's emails, but what you didn't read is that impacted 10 people.
So we can work in that direction. I guess to help me maybe with some clarity, maybe it's a question for Linda and Krista. What would you say is you need that information to help you what? And that might help me to better define what I'm going to try to pull together here.
Yeah, so like Dawson, what happened at Dawson? I had no idea that meant that Chris would be pulled in to go to the building, right? Or we had emails from parents who were, really concerned about how their child's first day back at in class, they were now having to be remote because of a quarantine situation. And so kind of anticipating that amount of disruption that comes out of quarantining, just because we're set on hybrid doesn't mean that we're going to be, everybody who is due to be in person is actually going to be there. And that can make people quite upset.
Sure.
Understandably.
Yep.
And so just seeing that, and then also, I think that it's hard to see the effect of what one positive means. You see just one number, but that's a human being who had these other contacts, and it impacts all of these other things. It's the COVID curse, right? One little thing is never one little thing. It spiderwebs out to everything. So seeing how, we had to have X number of classrooms closed in a school, and we had to redeploy resources that are supposed to be used elsewhere in order to have, kids in that day. That would be really clarifying, I think, to understand what is happening in the district. I don't know if that makes sense.
So like maybe 2 numbers there, right? So, it would be like 1 over 10. Because there are 10 absences due to COVID that day. And of course that number is going to change whatever absences. You can render it like a different color so people understand that those are absences, not cases, which is very important for us to be able to see. But that there are going to be a certain amount of absences every single day due to COVID, not just that one day, that one kid was gone that one day, right? So those numbers, they do, like Linda said, they have ripples. And so if they could actually see that or make that another graph. So it's either 1 over, 10, or here's the graph of cases, and then here's the graph of people absent from the school every day due to COVID restriction.
Gotcha.
Okay. Is that doable?
We can work towards that. Yep.
Okay.
So, Carolyn, I'll get to you in just a second. I just want to jump in on this topic. I guess I want to express a concern that we're almost digging in too deep into the data to get some numbers that will actually require a significant amount of manpower to figure out well, this person was out, and then now, moving forward, we may be able to easily get those numbers, but I don't think it makes sense to make it a retroactive number, like to go back and update the whole dashboard since the beginning.
I agree. It doesn't need to be from here back, but and then also I know that the schools all know how many people are absent that day due to COVID. That's not a number that should be difficult from here on to get. Absolutely.
Right.
I agree.
Right. Okay. I just want to make sure we weren't having them go back.
Right. No, when I said Dawson, I don't mean go back and dig out that. I just mean that's what it would clarify to us without having to email and request information and do, you know what I mean? It would just be, we pull up the website, we see the situation. Okay, there goes 22 emails that you don't have to open in your inbox.
That helps a lot, guys. That's what I was looking for by asking that question of what were you looking to use this for? That helps a lot.
Okay. Carolyn, what did you have?
Yeah, so I know that this was something that the teachers had asked for, I believe before the teachers actually returned to buildings, because I think that there was a lot of concern about how much the ripple effect actually goes out. And the response was about the amount of manpower or labor hours it would take to do this, which I understand. I know that our central office is lean. So I guess I'm wondering if this is actually doable, Bob, if you think that is something that wouldn't totally send Brendan over the edge.
We can work towards getting this in play. Thank you, Carolyn, for asking that.
And Mike. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was going to voice my concern about the manpower as well, because I'm sure not just in the schools, but people, and at least I can speak for myself, in multiple industries could feel overwhelmed with everything over this past year and stretched thin in resources. But more specifically, to clarify it and kind of simplify it, or Linda and Krista, are we looking for a number like, say, school A, like a fraction? So 1 out of this many total adults in the building is out due to something.
No, and I know it sounded like that when I said 1 over. I was just, the 1 is the one that's out, and how many people are now absent because, not necessarily because of that, right? But how many people are absent because of COVID? Not necessarily because of that one person. How many people, how many adults, how many students are out now because of COVID today? And I know that the school has that number, right? Like, so that's not a hard number to get. We know that we have this many teachers out today. We know we have this many kids out today due to COVID. And so we just write it down.
I understand. Well, actually I don't. But I'm trying to specify to make it simpler and easier on everyone. So you're just looking for a total number. This many people is who's normally in the school. This many people are not in the school right now because of COVID. You're not looking to literally contact trace. Just saying this is how many people are out point blank.
That's what I'm asking for. I don't know if that's what Krista is saying, but I know I can say for me, I just want to know the number of people who were supposed to be in the building, but because of COVID, for one reason or another, are not. And I say for one reason or another, because you might be quarantining because of a close contact outside of school.
Yeah.
Right. It's not because of a positive case inside the school, but because of, your neighbor who doesn't go to your school, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So because we do have that enough community level that we know that that's going to happen. So it's just who's supposed to be in, but who is called out because of COVID. That's it.
Thank you.
Right.
Per school, that would be marvelous. But
right.
I mean, this discussion is exactly why there's that concern about manpower, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah. I don't want it to be a lot of manpower. I think that we just, we all know. I mean, the schools know, right, Bob? Like how many teachers are out due to COVID, and how many students have called out due to a COVID something. That's something that we are keeping track of. How many people are out?
Maybe.
Maybe. Oh, we're not. Okay.
So suppose suppose my wife and I get a call that we're close contacts because we had so and so over the weekend, and we had supper and now they're positive, and the Board of Health where I live calls me and says you guys are close contacts. I might just call into to school and say, yeah, guys, I'm not feeling. I'm going to stay home for a little bit. We might not know that. I might be embarrassed to tell that type of thing, or I might say, yeah, I'm going to work remotely for a few days here, that type of thing. So we might know it, we might not. So what we can do is, to the best of our ability, what we do know, we'll put in there. We can come up with numbers. It'll be what it'll be. We can do that. There obviously is going to be some holes in it. It's not a hard and fast thing, and that's the unfortunate thing with all of this. It's kind of what it is. It's yeah, we'll do the best we can. We'll come up with something.
All right, let's turn mute off. I think that's, just in general, what everybody's asking is, don't go way above and beyond to get this info, but what the info that you have on absences due to COVID.
Yep.
If there's a way that we can display that.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Dashboard. I'd like to move on, but I will stick with it if you want. Okay, I'm going to take it and move on. So let's, anybody have an issue if I just kind of go out of order on these bullets and we'll stick with the hybrid side and then we'll do remote after?
Go for it.
All right. And let me just move this over so I can see everything. All right. So I guess we've gone over the dashboard. Are there any other safety issues that we have seen that we can discuss? I mean, I know just from what I've heard from my Simco meeting, things like that, the kids are amazing at wearing the masks in nearly every room. I'm sure Carolyn may see some kids that necessarily aren't able to, but even in those cases, I know they're making big strides. But any issues or kind of things that we need to address, or things that we have seen and have addressed, and now is a success on the safety side?
I'll say this: you guys have sort of set the standard that we needed to get on board and get equipment in there that'll make the classrooms cleaner and safer. So everybody now has every school has at least 2 sprayers. Mount View and the high school have more. The foggers, the atomizers, so that more than one person can go in if there's to get through and do the work of sanitizing the rooms a little bit quicker. Where we have carpets, we now have new rug machines in play. So at Choxit, at Houghton, in the ECC, these are places that either had something that's ancient or had nothing at all. And so those are we've gotten those machines in. In terms of the high school, they needed to have more the capability to clean rugs than what they did. So we've got them a new large machine and a new medium-sized one as well. So those are some good things that are in play to make things a little bit safer. We've also looked at the chemicals that we use inside of the sprayers and to help us for people that are maybe a little more sensitive with their skin. We're not using the really strong and that they use in hospitals unless we know there's a reason for concern. So we're using a different cleaner that's a little bit easier for people on their skin and contacts. And that was based on feedback we got after coming in and fogging areas pretty heavily when we were first trying this stuff out. So we're trying to not only be safe, but to use chemicals that aren't going to be as reactive to people as well. So to make it a little bit easier in that front. So we're kind of tweaking it and learning as we go. And I think those are good things, and that came from this group and your marching orders to us as a district. So that's kind of my update.
Good. Mike, you have a question?
Yes, to Dan and Bob, I was just wondering, either in this meeting or outside, where would be the appropriate time and place for me to inquire about how this has affected the budget and how this works, how all of these expenses, such as the machines and such, work with the funds?
I mean, we can talk about it now, if you'd like, real quickly. Carolyn, you're killing me, Smalls. That's a great line from a great movie, Sandlot. It's just a great movie.
Yeah.
So as I said early on in our discussion, I had set up a line in the undesignated appropriation. There's two lines in there. One is for the expense, and one is for payroll. And what we're doing is that we're basically classifying any and all expenditures to that line. And then as grant funds become available, Bob will work on a grant and write the grant, and we'll have a pretty lengthy discussion whether or not that expense, and I'll just use some of the HVAC work, is an allowable cost, say, in a grant, and in all that work that we've done so far, we have not put it through the grant. And then I'll look at FEMA and see what FEMA, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, what FEMA may support financially. Again, when we built the 21 budgets, none of this was anticipated. For all intents and purposes, we pretty much level funded the expense lines in operations and maintenance. Aside from the utilities, I mean, we built in, the anticipated costs for fuel and electricity and those costs, but that was it. I mean, we didn't beef up any. There was no such thing as PPE supplies whatsoever in the 21 budget. There was no line for that. There was no allocation for that. Again, for every building, we level funded the custodial supplies. We didn't bump up our overtime account for the for our two guys, Adam and Craig, in terms of the work that they've done. Again, we were fortunate to reallocate those costs to the SRG grant, the school reopening grant. Bob had built those costs into that grant. So I guess, Mike, to kind of speed up the story, as I often say, is that none of this was anticipated. We are, an analogy that I use often, as senior staff, is we're building the plane as we fly it. And we're fortunate enough that the tools that we're using to build a plane are federal grants, or for that matter, using some school choice money as an expense account until the federal grant dollars come in. The other thing too is, last year when we were looking to gear up and buying masks and all that, we also used some circuit breaker money, and we did only because, again, they were for sped staff and in sped classrooms, and I'll fall on the sword with any auditor if they question that and say, hey, that was a classroom. These were multiply handicapped kids, and we had to protect the teachers, we had to protect the paras and the kids, and so that's why we use that. So that's a 50,000 foot overview. I can go on for hours, but I know that you guys want to get out of here sometime tonight.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
Mike, if you needed more details, I have time Wednesday and Thursday this week, and if that doesn't work, we could find a time next week. I think if I could distill what Dan said down to maybe a single sentence or two, what we did so that we wouldn't end up with spending more money than we had available, I used the school choice account as sort of my bank account. I never spent more than what we had available in school choice. Once that sort of reached its capacity, luckily for us, there were grants that we had written, and I was able to allocate to pay back school choice. So we reclassed expenses from school choice into these grants, which freed up school choice. I spent it down again. We had other grants that came on board. So that's the way I was able to keep us sort of within a rough budget to make this work. So we wouldn't be like, what? We're in the hole, $500,000? That's how we made it work.
Okay, that answers my concerns. Thank you very much.
And we still are in the hole, if I may, in undesignated, in the undesignated appropriation, because again, there's no allocation in that appropriation. But you know, that's where I directed people to charge these expenditures to, so just to make it easy for reporting, you know, it's as simple as that. Rather than to go through line by line in every building's custodial supply line. Does this qualify? Does that qualify? So it gets complicated then. Does that help, Mike?
Yes, thank you.
Right.
All right. So on this topic, I wanted to take the first half of what Carolyn had sent us. We'll take the Wi-Fi and technology stuff after, but you know, it's all HVAC and PPE. I noticed that there's follow-up notes in here, like the art room being worked on. So I'll breeze through it like that real quick. If we need to go back, just let me know. I did have a concern on the spray. There's a comment on here that staff has requested the spray bottles, and it's been distributed, but there's somehow a disconnect. Is that still the case, Carolyn? Do you know, or is that something that's been addressed?
Yeah, we had talked about it with the union leadership had talked about it with the district administration, and so I think it's just an ongoing kind of reiteration with principals to make it known kind of district wide that there are these additional spray and spray bottles that are available if teachers want it. So I think there still seems to be a little bit of confusion, but just trying to make sure that people, teachers as well as principals, know that it's available if people want it.
Can I make a suggestion, Adam, if you don't mind, and to Carolyn's concerns here? What I'd like to propose is, rather than bring it to this group, Carolyn, in all seriousness, bring them to me, and I'll get these things resolved. You and I, we can work out a timeline, and let's and we'll get it done. And you know, I mean, I was going to go out on the limb and say, hey, I'll get these things done in 2 weeks' time. I mean, I can still go out on the limb, you know, because like Bob, I'm kind of possessed a little bit with some of this stuff, and I just want to put a check next to it, but I don't want to put a check and have it be done poorly. I mean, I want to put a check and have it be done correctly, and then move on, because there's going to be something else, you know, tomorrow morning waiting for us as well. And I mean, then if you feel free to come back to this group and say, we're good.
Yeah, just to give a little background, when I first started attending these facility meetings, this was kind of the kind of opportunity to bring some issues forward that were happening on the ground level, specifically, particularly before all members had come back. You know, being one of the special ed teachers back, it was sort of, I was giving more information about what's happening in the buildings and sharing it with the facilities group. And that was also before the leadership meetings started happening on a weekly basis. So I do feel like there's a lot of information being shared and things being followed up on much more quickly So, and we hadn't had a facilities meeting in like 2 months. So, these issues are kind of small, but if you would rather, I mean, I don't know what the kind of group thinks, if it would be good for me to share some of this info with the subcommittee members, or whether I just
So-
follow up with Dan and Bob.
So I think what we can do moving forward, you know, I definitely don't mind being updated on this stuff. You know, and maybe, you know, just you as the representative of the teachers could send it out to the subcommittee, and we don't necessarily need to discuss it.
Yeah.
But I'll keep it as an item that we can discuss if there's anything that you feel needs to be highlighted, that isn't necessarily getting addressed.
That sounds good.
Especially as it relates to the COVID and safety stuff. You know, I think that's a good, you know, check and balance. And, you know, if Dan's on top of it, I don't have an issue. The only thing that really stuck out to me on your thing was that staff that don't have a trust in wipes. Is there a concern that the staff has with the wipes, or is it just
Well, so
in general?
There's just I mean, this is you know, especially some science teachers having a lot more knowledge than I do about it. There was a concern about some wipes not having a dwell time on surfaces in order to kill virus and whatever else. So the remedy was, okay, if you're concerned about the safety of that wipe, because also hand sanitizer wipes were maybe being used interchangeably with surface sanitizing wipes, and there was a kind of a concern with that. And so the remedy from Daryl was, we got this spray. If people want to use a spray instead, then go for it. And then that's kind of where people are like, spray? We don't have spray. So just trying to get everyone, you know, kind of on the same page.
Okay. All right, that works. And that does save us a few minutes, so I'm all about that. Okay.
And Adam, just to support your where you're leading the group here, what has been put in place since maybe it was a couple months ago, and when I first heard about this list and was at a meeting, what we've done since then to sort of address those things. There's now we had our first monthly meeting of all head custodians recently, and that's something we're going to continue so they can get the same message and understand, because they're the ones oftentimes that interact with teachers, and if they don't know what's going on, it might seem like we don't have spray bottles, but we've set out and giving them all the same information. I update all the principals probably every week in terms of, here's a new thing we're trying, we want you to do this, here's how it's going to go. In terms of any issues at all in a building, the protocol is go to your principal, tell your principal, and then the principal knows who to contact in central office. If they're unsure, they always contact me. So we've set those things in place since I first saw this a couple months ago, the Carolyn's list there of things. So that's what we're doing behind the scenes to try to support, so she doesn't have to be ferreting out this information. It should be that here we go, and here's how we're going to address those things, including technology. They've streamlined access to their help desk, their ticket system, so people can more readily put things in. And we have one thing we changed with that is we're reaching out and acknowledging to people that we've received it and we're going to be on it. Even if we can't get to it for a day or so, we're doing that immediately so people can at least feel like, oh, they responded, they saw it, they heard me.
Okay, good. Linda.
Just a question about the related services, teachers, and anyone else who goes from building to building. I haven't heard from any now, but in the beginning of the year I did, and I didn't know who they were supposed to go to. So if someone who goes from building to building has an issue like this and reaches out to any of us, who do they go to?
Any principal that's there that they can contact. If they're Still not getting an answer. There's now a recurring meeting. I think it's every week, but it might be every 2 weeks, of service providers that Chris Smith and I kind of attend. She does it more often than I do, and we answer their questions right there. Some of the things we resolved is we help them to understand the importance of signing in and out of buildings for contact tracing. Some of them have gotten a little better masks because, like a physical therapist, I got to touch the kid. I got to be within like 3 inches of the kid in some cases for 20 minutes or so while I'm doing this or that. So we've worked to get them better fitting gloves and N95 masks that are actually fitted to their faces and those types of things. So we've worked to resolve those problems through those meetings. So they should contact their principal, and that's what we're telling everybody. Contact any principal, anyone that's in there. If that's not working, reach out to somebody in central office.
Excellent. All right. So I guess also under safety issues, the other thing I wanted to bring up, we had touched on it a little bit before, the updated CDC guidelines that came out on Friday. I didn't get a chance to look through all of them because, I mean, it's very extensive, but I did take about a half hour today and look through a good portion of it. And I know Linda's looked at it because she sent it to me and said, "Just get this up to the group." So I don't know where to necessarily lead the discussion, but I do want to, I guess, what is administration doing with the new guidelines? How are we looking to incorporate them? And, how much does it differ from what DESE is telling us? And I mean, it's also over the weekend of vacation. So, I understand if you haven't gone through it bit by bit.
Daryl sent an email out today saying he reviewed it over the weekend, and he felt that we were meeting most of them. Massachusetts differs from this on the spacing. They're saying 3 to 6 feet, and they're standing by that. They're also looking at removing some of the restrictions in terms of, you have transportation on the agenda here. They're allowing kids to sit a little closer on the buses than they had in the past. So that's where they're actually loosening those. Their hope is that we'll be able to get all kids back into school in the fall, and that really impacts spacing. So I think Massachusetts has a little bit different take on these federal sort of guidance here. We go by what the Department of Education tells us here. That's our primary, that's who's telling us what to do, and that's what we're following. So, I mean, that's kind of what I see as differences maybe between the CDC. I've only skimmed it, I haven't read it, but that's one of the things I focused in on, because that's where we've been different in the past.
Okay. Linda, go ahead.
So I had the time this weekend to go through it fairly in depth. I have been anxiously waiting to hear what Massachusetts would say about this, because I believe they were anticipating a different direction.
Yes, they were.
However, I do agree that we are mostly meeting a lot of these. So that's encouraging. And what I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to go through what my main takeaways were from this, but I kind of felt that there were, like 4 or 5 basic main things that would differ. And, one of them is when it comes time to using what kind of data we use, and then some of the protocols. So when we talk about using the state guidelines for like spacing, that's not required that we use the 3 to 6 feet, correct? Right? We can choose to use the CDC recommended 6 feet. It's not. But I mean, that was always my understanding, because plenty of districts have been pretty strict about only using the 6 feet of distance for their calculations of how many students they can fit in. So, I mean, basically what I see with these new guidelines is that if we adhere to these, then we have the best chance of staying open safely versus staying open out of inertia. And so, to my mind, that makes it pretty useful. So I don't know if it would be appropriate at this time to make a motion. I don't know if that's in order.
It's not out of order depending on the motion, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, because I just don't know which order. I don't want to not discuss. I don't want. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, we are in just general discussion of the topic, so we don't need a motion to be able to discuss anything.
Then maybe
you can talk about what you may be proposing if you prefer to do that before a motion.
Yeah. Okay. All right. If that works for the group, then. So basically, the CDC guidelines recommend using county-wide data instead of smaller areas because people move around in these wider ranges, and they provide a tool for you to look at the county-wide data to look at the number of new cases over a 7-day period per 100,000. And so that's one benchmark on their charts for where the community is at. And then they also look at the percent positive, I believe, is the other criteria. Then it goes through 5 main pieces of criteria for mitigation, and so it's universal masking, and a minimum, and they're very clear about this, a minimum of 6 feet distance at all times. And then there's also the other ones of hand sanitizing and hygiene, surface cleaning along with ventilation, and then contact tracing. They also recommend monitoring the community level weekly instead of seeing how it goes for like almost a month and then deciding, but to base your decision weekly because of the lag time. And then the recommendation to bring on surveillance testing so that, and the guidelines also show what to do if you don't have that testing available, what the recommendations are for opening and levels and things you can do. And then they have another chart for if you do have surveillance testing. Because what we keep on running into is this, that we just don't have the data. And absence of data does not equal evidence of absence, right? That's the key problem. There's also a really good bibliography at the end of these of the guidelines that goes through kind of a wild ride of what the scientific understanding was in the spring, summer, fall, and I think the most recent publications were in January. So the other piece that I think would be smart for the district to follow these guidelines is that it would put us in the best position to handle any of these variant strains that we're hearing about. The UK strain, there's already 2 confirmed cases of the UK strain in Paxton, and that one is considered to spread more easily, and now they're discovering is more fatal, and right. I mean, we don't need to go into all of that, but basically what I would like to do is to recommend that we adhere to these guidelines so that we can be in the most stable position possible for the duration of COVID. And so that was where I was going with a motion, is to recommend to the full committee for the district to adopt the CDC guidelines as published on February 12th, 2021.
So, yeah, go ahead, Bob, and then I'll take input from other people.
So what Linda went through there, I think there's only one area really what I see which could be an issue. We're that's mask wearing. Yep, that's what we're doing. We're making sure that everyone's doing that. I think we're in line with that. We have hand washing protocols in terms of using soap and water. We have signs up for that. We have hand sanitizer spread out throughout the school. And there's different touch points where people come in and they sanitize after they come back in the building, before leaving the building, all those types of things. I think we're pretty close on a lot of those. It's going to be the spacing. That's where we're going to maybe see a difference. And let me explain a little bit about what I mean by that. Right now, we have cohort A, B, they're in person 2 days a week. Cohort D is in person 4 days a week. And then there's cohort C that's fully remote. Recently, over the last 2 weeks, we've begun to see kids from cohort C, families, start to ask to have their kids brought back in person to be in cohort A or B. So that if that trend continues, that's where we're going to bump into it, because we're going to have more kids coming back into our schools than we currently have. And the only way to fit that is to add another desk to the classroom. Let's say if I have 10 desks available and there's 11th kid that's coming in, I need to add one more desk. That means the other desks have to be a little bit closer together. So that means we're closer than 6 feet. So that could be an issue. And the reason I say an issue, do we have the right to tell that family, no, you can't come back to school now? We've always said, and the guidance we've received from the state is, you set this up, let families choose which direction they want to go, but you have to give them the opportunity to change their mind if once they figure it out, or if something's not working for them one way or the other throughout the year. You can set a time restriction on it, saying, look, we can't do this immediately. We need a few weeks to get you on the bus and to do this and that. The other thing that sort of ties in with spacing, and maybe when we're thinking about this, is the bus. If the kids are sitting right now at 3 feet apart on the bus, and the state's saying you can fit more kids on the bus, don't use that as something that's restricting you. That's really that's the limiting factor right there, or that's the lowest common denominator. They're being close on while they're on riding that bus for the kids that do ride the bus. So that's something else that's in play in this whole thing. So I just wanted to make you guys aware of that. That's really where we'll come down, and I imagine that's what for the full committee, that's where some of the debate would be around, is around spacing. The other ones, yes, absolutely, Linda. We strive to maintain as much as we can what the CDC puts out there for guidance around those other things. I think spacing is going to be something that's going to come into play one way or another here.
All right, Linda, go ahead and follow up if you want, and then we'll go to Mike.
Really, really short, I promise. There are some follow-ups for circumstances like that within the guidelines. It's only a few sentences though. So I don't know if there'll be deeper things there, but about if you can't do physical distancing between people, then to do between cohorts and to pods. And so if that might be another avenue, I don't know. I mean,
I missed the last thing you said.
To keep distance between cohorts and
Okay.
to create pods and create the distance between the pods. I don't know if that is rooted in reality of a school, to be honest, where I know some of these regulations, I mean, the virus doesn't care about a school, right? It cares about propagating. So that's where I look at it as what can we do?
Well, I know, and Carolyn's here from ECC. I know we talk in there about bubbles, maintaining these different bubbles. So you don't have one bubble intersect another one if you can help it. Like, this is my bubble's bathroom time. And then now once they've cleared out, this is when we go and do this. This is how our kids go to the cafeteria and some of the other schools. And you maintain some type of distance between one grouping of kids and another. So I mean, if that's an alternative that's in there, that's something we could pursue. I'm just saying, I think the reality that we might bump into if we say, look, it's 6 feet or nothing, and then we have parents that are saying, it's my right to come back into school if I choose that. How are we going to tell them no? Like, there's no room. Sorry, should have chosen earlier. I mean, I think we could run into some real serious problems there. Davis Hill is probably going to be the first school that might bump into that. They've had some people that have migrated, and they're just about at capacity now. And they won't be the only one. That's just my 2 cents.
Mike, go ahead.
Thank you. So Bob mentioned most of my concerns. I really do understand the concern about ensuring 6 feet. I do understand it, but think about how long it's taken to get where we are right now. And the whole 6 foot distancing was a really big time consuming talking point, and I think a negotiation point, you can correct me if I'm wrong, with the unions. It's if we change anything on that, we're gonna have to go through a whole process again, I feel like. And Bob's right, we can't deny people of their education. And as it is, parents are very, especially in cohort A, feel as though they're not getting a proper education, which is a whole separate issue. But if we're limiting kids, I wasn't even aware that bringing in more kids would limit our capacity. I didn't even think of that as some people being remote right now, and then if we bring them in, that's going to make the classrooms tighter. I just foresee a lot of issues with saying, and a lot of people have voiced this opinion in the general school committee, with saying the 6 feet just opens up a whole can of worms. And if I look in the CDC, at least what I see on the CDC website, it says, I'm going to try to find it again. It says wherever necessary, the 6 feet. It doesn't say at all costs. It says wherever necessary. I can't find the exact point, but I just don't want to cause any more issues with opening up this again. Thank you.
Do you mind do you want me to wait, Adam, or
Um,
can I jump in?
Krista, are you okay if Linda responds?
I'm pretty sure she'll say what I.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Linda.
No, I just that as a parent of cohort C students, they're getting an education. They're getting a really good education. I have to hold back there because I feel like they are, it's not without its challenges, obviously. But I am very taken aback by the general idea that 2 days in is somehow like a panacea for all of the education woes under COVID. So I guess that's where I would just push back is just this idea that remote is not an education. If we're, it's something that our district worked hard to create from scratch, and I'm seeing it work better for one of my kids than another. I mean, it's not what I would choose under any other circumstances for my kids, but considering that this is a pandemic and it's a virus who has no motivation, no reasoning, nothing except just divide and spread, there's not like a negotiation point we can make with the virus. And so that's all my angle is, to try to keep as many people as safe as possible. And we have other ways of educating our kids. It's not going to work for every kid, but it's going to work for a lot. And so that's just my only pushback there. And then I'll read what you put in the chat of the quote.
And Linda, my apology. I didn't mean to even infer that. I was just talking about a reality. We are getting more people that are asking to come back. I'm not inferring that any decision is better than the others. It's just a reality of where we're at. So my apology if that's the way it came across.
To reiterate what I was saying, every parent deserves the right to have their child physically in school if they choose to do so. So we need to make that possible. And considering you do have the 3 feet on the buses, and I don't know how that would work with adding more kids on the buses.
Yeah.
I'm just going to read what you put in the thing so that it's in the recording. So the quote you found was physical distancing, at least 6 feet, should be maximized to the greatest extent possible. To ensure physical distancing, schools should establish policies and implement structural interventions to promote physical distance of at least 6 feet between people. Cohorting or podding is recommended to minimize exposure across the school environment. So I will say, just on that topic, and then I'll get to you, Krista, I promise. There's also another section in here on school status, and it lists as open for full in-person, and for that it says physical distancing of 6 feet or more to the greatest extent possible, and then it has a footnote that is pretty much exactly what you wrote. And then under K through 12 schools in hybrid learning mode or reduced attendance, then it says physical distancing of 6 feet or more is required. Now, I haven't read through this enough to understand why it's different for the two, unless it's because the hybrid's chosen for based on the factors of infection rates, et cetera. And that's why that's at the 6 feet or more. And then once that gets lower, then you can reduce the physical distancing. So Linda, I know you've read that. Am I fairly correct?
Yeah, basically, that the research has shown the connection between community rates and affecting schools, and so the higher the community rates, which are what determines if you're going to be in person, virtual, or hybrid, then you would need to take increased mitigation steps in order to counteract the higher community spread and likelihood that COVID would be entering into the schools.
Okay. I do have more to say, but I'm going to give Krista her time first. So go ahead.
I don't have much because Linda. And always just reading my mind. But my concern is more like moral concern and ethic concern. And my big concern is that every time we bring up safety and how important these regulations are, there's that kickback of, yeah, but it's just going to be so hard, or, oh, but it's going to take so long to make that happen. And I just don't think that at this point, or at any point, that should ever be an argument when we're in a pandemic that's killing people, and it is going to be hard. And and we are all working really, really hard. And maybe it's just disappointing that the kids that want to come into the school don't necessarily get to because it's 6 feet, and our schools can't accommodate that, and that's just physical fact. And like Linda said, we can't negotiate with the virus. We can try to be, politicians about it, and decide whether or not we want to believe in the restrictions and limitations that are given by the scientists. But I personally would like to keep our schools open, and I want to do everything that we can to keep them open. And we are, like Linda said, providing them education. They are getting an education. It's nobody's favorite. Maybe it's some favorite. There's got to be some kids out there that it is their favorite, right? But you know, they are getting something, and maybe it's just a little bit disappointing right now for some kids. That's all.
Thanks, Krista. So, Mike, if you don't mind, I'm going to just make some comments, and then I'll go to you. So, you know, looking through these guidelines, I've, again, not had the time to fully go through it, which is why I would personally hesitate to necessarily push something forward as a recommendation today, beyond just a general, I guess, recommendation and perception that administration maybe should take, that, you know, these are new guidelines available. There's a lot of, I mean, there is just, it's a fact, there's a lot of really good data in here. There's a lot of really good information. There's many multi-layered risk mitigation strategies within here. And again, this is maybe pulling a little bit of my background, but, you know, my whole job is about risk mitigation, and, you know, there's always some level of risk that you accept, and a level of risk that is a hard line, and you say no, and you do what you can to mitigate all of those risks. That being said, you know, before I get way off track, you know, there's looking at the distancing. There's, yeah, I know, I mean, from what we looked at, we're at or nearly at 6 feet practically everywhere. I know the high school is the pretty big exception to that. But we also have fewer students in the high school than we were expecting, which, you know, does help with that. You know, as we move forward and there's more students that are looking to move from cohort C to either A or B, that's definitely going to become a bigger issue as we move forward and figure out how to fit people in if we can, and what we can do. One of the big things I take back from this is this guideline is very good at laying out, you know, that it's not a set, this is what you do. It is a sliding scale. If things are really bad, then you're retracting, and you're stepping back. And then as things get better, you're opening it up and you're relaxing a few of those things, but you're still maintaining vigilance on a lot of it. And then, you know, one of the big things I did see in here is you're not necessarily opening up all the grades at once. And that's based on, you know, some of the data there. You know, they're really looking at the younger grades, getting them in. And I know that's something we've seen across the board, that those younger grades are the ones that really need to be in there, especially K1, 2. You know, and that's some of the feedback I've gotten in my Simco. It's feedback we've all heard from, I mean, everybody. You know, those kids are the ones that are having the hardest time with remote. You know, some are doing great at it, but there's definitely, those are the kids having the hardest time. So I guess, you know, to pull a Dan phrase, to make a long story short, too late. You know, I guess my recommendation is, you know, definitely these are really good guidelines. It does appear very well thought out. So take this and really go through it and see what we can look at. You know, it does use some different factors. You know, do we need to update our matrix? You know, we created our matrix with our boards of health, but, you know, using this information, are there things in there we could tweak? You know, some of our stuff, looking at our testing positivity rates, going from, best to worst, all fits within the lowest category on these, on the CDC guidelines. So, maybe do we need to shift that around a little bit? Something else, do we need to expand it or just measure it differently? So, I think there is room for improvement in what we're doing, and I think that's something we should always strive for. And that's it. I guess I'll stop from there.
Can I just quickly reply to what you said too? Now,
Yeah.
This is not, it's not forever, right? Like we have to like still like hold on to like all sorts of hope that like, I don't know, in 2 weeks, the CDC is like, oh, by the way, guys, we dropped like this thing over the United States and we're good now. So like everyone can go back and do whatever, right? So they change their minds about things. They get more research, and things improve, and things are going to improve. I have hope and faith in that. And so, for now, these are the guidelines, right? But it's not always going to be like that. It's just going to be tough now. That's it.
Okay. Mike, go ahead.
Welcome to Massachusetts. We're on day 345 of the 2 weeks to flatten the curve. So anyway, just had to throw that in there. So side note, there are parents reaching out that want their kids in full in person right now. So I'd like to just keep that on the side burner in mind. Now we are offering 2 modes. I think that was an excellent point made. We are offering 2 modes of education, whether some people find that one is better for them than the other. And I'm sure there's different opinions on that. But the point is that parents get to choose, or children, but parents make the choice for them. They get to choose which mode that they would like to learn in. Now, I had assumed at the beginning of all this, when I first joined the committee, I assumed that the way that the spacing was set up in the rooms was to accommodate, assuming that every kid was in either cohort. So every child was going to be in person, one or the other. I'm now learning that's not the case, which is a cause for concern about the spacing. So where was I going with that? So anyways, yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Adam, would it be appropriate for me to reply to that about how we did the spacing so you guys can understand that? So,
yeah, absolutely. Especially for, Mike and Krista, who weren't on the subcommittee at the time.
The Department of Education put out a tool that was developed by some outside vendor. And basically you put the dimensions of the room in, you put how many adults there are, you put any major pieces of furniture in there, and it will then tell you how many kids can fit in there at different distances. So you could put in 3 feet, 5 feet, 4.5, whatever you did. So I went around to all the schools with the principals. We walked into every classroom. We measured each classroom, and we filled the thing in at that point. Is this a special ed room? How many adults are going to be in there? Are they using that desk and this desk? That led us to remove excess furniture so there'd be more physical space in there. And then we maximized the number of seats in there and set the limit at 6 feet apart. So in most schools, that worked fine. That was like, okay, Bob, we can fit 10 seats in here. I can fit 11. In this room, I can fit 7, that type of thing. So they knew the maximum capacities. When we got to the high school, it was so far off from half of the kids being in there that we had to make some decisions in there. We chose to move them a little closer together. We used 5 feet, and then we were able to fit in extra seats in there. And even at that, our fear was that we wouldn't have enough kids choosing to be fully remote, and where are we going to put the extra kids? Because we can't just throw them off somewhere. The initial plan was we'd fill the kids up to a certain point, and then the last 2 or 3 kids would have to sit in the library and participate in that classroom down the hallway remotely and work it that way. So it never was a really good situation there. Luckily, there were more kids that participated remotely in the high school. We didn't run into that. But that's the capacity problem we have at the high school. Those rooms physically are smaller than what you'd expect for a high school classroom. And I'm not sure why that was ever done, but it had to be some reason behind it. But that's about 80% of that high school is just the rooms are too small. It's not really a classroom that'll fit that many kids in it. Based on my experience in other districts, they're just too small. So the tool itself told us the number of kids. We tried to stay away from looking at half of a capacity sort of thing. Like if half the kids are in cohort A and the other half of my population's in cohort B, yep, we need 13 and 13, seats. It was based off of that tool telling us how many we could fit in there at a certain distance.
Just to add to that, Bob, one of the key things in your spacing that I learned when I was going around is you could actually fit more, but then you have the desk too close to the wall. Yes. And I was like, well, why is that an issue? And it's like, well, because the kid's leaning on the wall.
Yeah.
And that's not a surface that's necessarily getting clean. So you need to maintain that spacing from other surfaces as well. So that was an additional factor.
Adam, I just remembered one other point I was going to bring up. I do hope that, because it was disappointing that we couldn't be in school back when the weather was really nice, I do hope that maybe we could utilize tents or something to maybe expand the amount of kids that we can have when the weather's nicer. I know I can just give an example of some of the colleges I've seen that have outdoor power units as well as tents set up. So rain or shine, they have class when it's nice outside, and maybe something like that could be utilized.
We actually talked about that today at staff meeting, and I'm looking to see what we can get for tents. Number one, if they're even available, and then what it might cost. They may not be out there, but and we talked about if we did do it, looking at sometime either late March, although it gets pretty darn cold in March still, or early April, and even in April it's cold. So, but that's one of my homework assignments, and we'll see what comes out of it.
Thanks. Krista, you were next, and then I'll go to you, Carolyn, and then Linda.
Totally dig the tent idea. I think that would be fantastic. Yeah, maybe space heaters. I don't know. Okay. So anyway, my question was about the high school, right? So we had less people or less students wanting to come in, right? So does that help with the whole 6 feet thing in the high school? Right. So maybe that's not a place that we have to necessarily worry, even though that was like a big worry area. But if we have less people in there already, and students are probably more likely in the high school setting to stay remote at this point and not ask to come back.
Chris, the thing that complicates it at the high school, unlike an elementary school, where Mr. Burlow's grade 2 classroom meets in that room, and it has this many kids in cohort A and B. In the high school, depending on what classes are scheduled in there, there's a whole bunch of different sized populations that are in there. So that's where it gets a little bit more complicated in the high school. They also change schedules halfway through the year, so different kids are assigned to different rooms, different size demands. So we couldn't as easily simply say, yep, this classroom now is going to have all desks at 6 feet. We'd have to still allow some flexibility in there, because it's kind of complicated to schedule the high school. And if you're taking a certain number of rooms offline, you could still do it. But if you're taking too many offline for bigger cohorts, it would become too complicated, simply because the nature of the beast.
Fair. I haven't been in high school for a long time. I'm super old, so I forgot about that whole part of it. You're right. It's complicated.
It just kind of is. I mean, we have good intentions. I'm not trying to downgrade the intentions behind any of this discussion. I'm simply bringing up some points of reality for us to maybe kind of reflect on it. This is what's implied. If you guys were to make a motion and put something in play, we have to execute it, and these are some areas where it's going to get messy.
Thank you. Well, that's why we keep you around, to keep us, in reality.
Carolyn, you had some input.
Yeah, this was it kind of goes along with what Mike was saying. I grew up in a school district in Maryland where every building had about like 20 temporary buildings. It was like the temp village. And obviously those would be more expensive and more kind of long-term. But I wasn't sure if that was anything that would be reasonable to help with the situation specifically at the high school.
We had those when I was there in the high school. Like there was another school behind the school.
Yeah.
Of just like tent building. I think they kind of like glued it to the side of the building when I was there. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Dan can give more details. We did look into that, not because of COVID necessarily, but we had some other work that we was planning to do and maybe we're going to do, and we had to start to price those things out. And suddenly the availability just fell off the map. And so Dan can speak to it, and they're a lot costlier than what I even anticipated. And I'm in school, so you'd think I'd have a better idea. Dan?
So we looked at that about 2 years ago, and we had those when I was out in Leominster when they had the building project out there. And again, the cost a couple of years ago were about $50,000 per unit. And again, you can, you can add bells and whistles. You can have bathrooms built in or not built in, and it's like buying a car, seriously. And the more bells and whistles you add to it, the more expensive. And to use the car analogy for a second, the 50K was like a base model, so to speak, and it only goes up. And that doesn't include, the transportation cost, the setup cost, and before you know it, you're probably talking $100,000 for one unit, for a Chevy Cavalier, so to speak. Ouch.
Sorry.
What's that, Linda?
That was my first car, Chevy Cavalier. I loved it. It's Roxanne.
Memories. Don't get me going.
What kind of car is a tent with a space heater?
It's like the Fiat Punto I rented over in
What's
Germany.
that, Mike? What was that, Mike?
If it has heat, a tent with a heater or a whole building?
Just a tent.
Lincoln, I don't know.
Oh no, that's not a Lincoln. No.
Not a Cadillac. It's not a Mercedes.
Actually, I'll look at that as well when I look at the pricing of the tents. To see what those large, and you see them, in restaurants out for outside dining, what those would cost. I'll be honest with you, I'd be a little bit nervous. This is just me. Having them in a tent, and I'd just be nervous about fire. That's again, the glass is always 3/4 empty in my world.
I think you definitely need some sort of heating unit, not a propane fired like flame thing. Linda, you're up next.
So I would like to throw my hat in on this whole using outdoor spaces where we can. That would be, I know, a whole other type of planning and expenses and whatnot, but if we can take advantage of outdoor space, that is huge. I know that the being indoors eating is a big bridge too far for a lot of families, and that might open it up. Because, you know, this is, you guys, I'm sure, are sick of me talking about this, but a lot of cohort C never had a choice. It was never going to be safe enough given their own circumstances. So, you know, it's just something to keep in mind. But what I also was wanting to ask about was the possibility of renting other spaces in the towns to create more space. And I'm sure that that's one of those things that sounds great and then in practice is a whole other thing. But I have to wonder about what kind of flexibility we would have in using, you know, I'm thinking of in Sterling where there are some other buildings that aren't just the schools that maybe could hold an overflow of some kind of something. I'm not sure, but I don't know if there are other spaces in the other, you know, across the 5 towns that maybe, because when I'm hearing the parents of young students wanting to have their kids more in person, you know, I have a first grader. She's learning to read. I get the issues of what's happening remote while you're trying to learn to read. I get it. But just saying, here the doors are open, come on in, but you're not still 6 feet apart. You're not having these other check marks of safety that have to be there for the kids who are staying remote. You know, it doesn't, you can't leave those kids behind, basically. So there are the remote kids who are there by choice, and there are the ones who are remote by necessity. And the call to have all of K through whatever in person is going to leave out the kids who are who are remote by necessity. And so that's where I just want to make sure that that's front of mind for when we say, yeah, we can be in person.
Linda, you're making a good, solid point there. But in terms of renting other properties, we did at least do a thought experiment around that, and just sort of, well, let's assume we're doing it. So what do we got to have in place? So it's cleaning of those things. It's ensuring the proper HVAC is in place and that the right filtration is in place. So it became suddenly very complicated for us to just make this thing work. We were adding extra custodial staff. It's who's going to be the remote principal over there? Who's going to take care of that? Who's going to be, in charge of it? Those types of things. So it became a little bit more complicated. There's a lot of things in play in schools that maybe aren't necessarily in play in a in a commercial space that you might be renting. I'm not saying it's an impossibility, but it became pretty complicated pretty quickly. And so that's why we never really went too far down there. Instead, we chose the path of let's make our schools as safe as possible and let's maximize the use of every inch in there. So some rooms that typically were used for this were like, nope, we're feeding kids in there now also, or we're moving this classroom in there because that's a really big class in there and we got to have more kids. We've done that in some of the schools. For instance, in one of our elementary schools, we switched where grade 5 was going to be because that was our biggest grade level. And so teachers were kind of upset. What do you mean I got to move my classroom? Well, those are the biggest classrooms in the school. They're now grade 5, and that's where we're housing them because we needed more physical space. So that's the approach we took. We tried to think that through because it seemed pretty good at first. Like, yeah, let's definitely explore that. The other thing is we don't have the licenses nor the vehicles to transport food from one location to the other. So that also came into play. So suddenly when we started to unpack it a little more, it was like, wow, this is maybe not as simple as it at first seemed. So just so you know.
No, I appreciate that because I mean, you see the learning centers that have popped up, and it's good to keep in mind all of the things that they don't have to worry about that a school is required to worry about. So I appreciate that because it does seem like a simple, why don't we just go for it? Hey, let's just do this. We can't.
Let alone the additional insurance cost as well, which would be a significant increase.
Reality. Thank you, Bob.
Linda, if you're good, just put the hand down so I see you next time. So one of the comments that Linda made is as we continue down the next year, whatever, it is really important to keep in mind, that there are kids that just need to be cohort C, and not by choice. So we can't, while the big push is to open, get as many people in, especially the younger kids, teachers, administration, and the committee need to remember that we still need to provide for the kids that can't do that. That is a really big thing, and I know that you guys have that in mind, and you are working strongly towards that. It's just something that should be reiterated. And there is a flip side to that, that it's informed decision making, and as long as we're protecting the people that we are basically, that are our employees. We're protecting our teachers and our staff and everything. And especially as we move forward and the vaccines are available to those teachers and staff. There are limits that just we as a district have regarding space. And we, even in these classrooms that we're talking about where that spacing is under 6 feet on the desk, the spacing between the teachers and the students is 6 feet or more. Even in those ones where it's a more compact classroom. And we're going to continue doing that moving forward, because I think that makes sense, and that's what we had talked about before. But there is, just as long as people are informed, there does come a point where, if this is an endemic situation, which is what we are hearing, this isn't going away this year or next year. Like, if you are susceptible to getting COVID, it's something that may be around for a very long time, which it's horrible to think about. It really is. But there are decisions that at some point it has to go back to the parents of those students, and to make that informed decision on what is best for how their student is able to learn. There's those of us that are going, well, my daughter or whatever learns very well remotely. We're going to stick with that for now, until it's not an issue, and then we can just say everybody's going back. Remote's not an option because it's not an issue. I can't wait for that day. I really can't, and I know the rest of us can't either. But there is a point where we do need to look at opening more, and these guidelines do lay out a way to do that, looking at while still protecting everybody as much as possible. And hopefully this vaccine can be expanded to children soon, and we get more data on that. But looking at opening up those younger grades to bring those kids in.
Adam, you make a really good point there, and maybe it goes back to Krista as well when she mentioned about maybe the high school's a little different. High school's 50-50. It's a split between the kids that are in and the kids that are at participating at home remotely. And I think some of those kids are thinking, this really does work for me. And I think that's something we owe that population. They're older and maybe better suited for that. And if you took the whole pandemic away, that kind of was the direction we were hoping to get to. I've been in other places in my career where I've seen that work very effectively, especially in grades 11 and 12. It gives the kids more options. It better prepares them for college. And I've just seen the upside to that. So I think we have to keep that in mind. Even after the pandemic, we've gotten on the other side of it. I think that's something that's really important for us as a committee and for leadership within the district to keep in mind. And Adam, you brought up a really great point. This is another viral sort of infection. It's very similar in a way to the influenza. we get a shot, and does it wipe it out? No, there's always new strains every year, but it kind of helps you to get over it a little quicker. It could be that long term, COVID's not going to go away. It's just going to be like, oh yeah, it's flu season, it's COVID season, and a shot certainly helps us to get on the other side of it. And that could be the reality that we're having to deal with long term. Maybe it's not killing as many. We're better. We understand it a little better. We understand treatment better. But I just don't see it as suddenly going away. It's already mutating too much, and it's going to be present, and we'll just have to be dealing with it, but hopefully in better ways than it was.
I just died a little bit inside hearing that.
Right? COVID season, it's like
dump of glass of truth.
Oh,
it's a virus. I mean,
you with the reality.
But I will say though that the faster we stamp it out, the better shot we have to not
stamp that out.
Yeah, I get no. Yeah. No hope, right? No. I mean, the faster we slow the spread, right, is there's not as much chance for the mutations, and then the vaccine will work better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just do this, everybody.
COVID season.
Yeah, that's not what I wanted to hear, even if I kind of drove the bus towards that. Dan and Mike, I don't know who was first. Mike, if you have a direct follow-up to this, I'll have you go. Is that okay, Dan?
It's related, but if Dan was first, I want to let him go. No? Okay. So to correct my earlier quote, it's we're on day 330 of the 2 weeks. To correct my earlier quote. We cannot stop cohort C. I think we're going to keep that around for quite a while, regardless of how many kids are in school. I think that's a requirement. We need to have that as an option. That'll probably be for another year, maybe more. But I'd like to take a step back and just acknowledge that none of us are health professionals. None of us are epidemiologists, I think is the word. We're all doing the best we can to make the decisions that we feel are the best that we can do. I did want to bring up, and I know I've had kind of a think tank with some other people way back about this. And would it be possible? Now, I wouldn't want to learn remotely, but I do understand a large portion of the high school is learning remotely. Would it be possible to utilize the high school for other grade levels and have the high school go fully remote? As much as I hate saying that, but would it be possible to do something creative with that, or is that logistically not likely?
That's
the high school is set up for bigger kids, so just the physical size of urinals, those types of things, sinks, tables, chairs, all that stuff, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be cost effective to work for very young kids. But if we wanted to collect together some of the older kids, I'd say grade 5 on up, those types of things, I mean, it certainly could. It then gets into, are we busing kids across town lines? And that's something that I don't believe is in the agreement, the regional agreement, below grade 9, I think it is. So it would enter, we'd have to sort of talk about that. And yeah, we've talked about some of that stuff. It could be, but I'm not sure how that works.
Davis was having a hard time, right? Davis Hill?
Yep.
Is that the one? Okay. I mean, not that it's the simple thing and like, oh, obviously we're just going to switch the schools around. But I mean, that might be something that's to consider.
It is. You kind of end up chasing your tail, though. So if we're going to use Mount View, like we're going to put the Mount View kids at the high school, then are we putting over at Mount View because their facilities are set up for junior high size kids, which are just about the same size as high school kids? So is it grades 4 and 5 across the district? We could certainly do those types of things. But you're right. That could be something creatively if we're saying it's vitally important to get preschool, kindergarten, grades 1 and 2 in fully. That's probably going to take up all those elementary buildings and ECC. So then the grades 3, 4, 5 got to go somewhere else, and then the grades 6, 7, 8 got to go somewhere else. And that could be a solution that works for Holden. Now, what are we going to do in the other towns? So it's kind of, you got to kind of play it out. I guess it's kind of cool about this stuff. It's certainly intriguing for your brain, but it's also kind of tough. It's defining the spider web because it's not just a point A to B thing. It's, oh, and then what about this, and how are we going to support that, and where's this going to go, and then when Dan's involved also, and he asks the right questions there, well, how much is that going to cost, and where's the money coming from? So you start to get to that point where it's complicated, but it is kind of exciting to be able to come in and let's blow it up and make it all work differently, and how's that going to work? And that is kind of exciting, but it's complicated.
Can we note that Bob just took a very positive spin on reality there instead of that?
There you go, Bob. Good
Catch
for you.
those silver linings where we can, right?
So we can't punch people over lines, is what you're saying.
I believe the regional agreement prohibits that, because one of the things we looked at earlier was there was some grade, and we were like, oh, let's just bring them over here because they have space. And then Daryl's saying, no, you can't do that. It's in the agreement. So I haven't read it, but I've been told that one time when we were brainstorming another problem.
Are there policies that need temporary, changing due to trying to make COVID work, or not COVID work, but school work around COVID? We don't want to make COVID work.
Because we do bring special ed kids from one town to another. I mean, because we only have a program available in one place. So maybe there's an opening that's in there that we could kind of open up a little wider. I don't know. That's what we'd have to look. That's different than the school committee just saying we're doing this. You actually have to get the towns to be involved in, making those amendments.
We'd have to look at that. And it might take a deep dive into that regional agreement. I mean, I know it's something that's always been thrown out there, and even when we were allowing people to go to Thomas Prince for the STEM program, parents would have to drop off at the town line, and then they could get bussed in. So, I mean, even in cases like that, it just wasn't allowed. But, this is extenuating circumstances. What level of approval from the town would it need? Is it something we could get a select board to do, or is it a town meeting issue? It is things to discuss and get info on. I don't have the answer. I know it's not an easy issue. But I know Dan had a conversation.
I think changes have to be voted on by at a town meeting, I think, to the regional agreement.
Yeah, if it's a change, I know it definitely needs to be a town meeting thing. If it's a emergency measure, maybe there is wiggle room for that, but that would definitely require legal getting involved and looking at it. So, maybe that's something we could note in the minutes. That we may want to pass off to the legal subcommittee as we brainstorm ideas. Is this at all possible?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're gonna try to get to Dan because he's been very patient.
I just wanted to bring us back to the agenda, if I may, Adam. We're pushing almost 10 past 9, and we still, there's a number of items here. Then we've got the 10-year capital, and that could be a 3-hour meeting in and of itself. And happy to do it. Carolyn, looks like you're cringing there. But to do it justice, seriously, to do it justice, it's going to require probably more than maybe 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is. And then there's a 22 budget. I think we should talk about that a little bit. And then you've got your policies. So, maybe there are just some things that we just table for the next meeting. This has been a great discussion, but I'm just being sensitive to people's time, and we'll be pushing 3 hours before you know it. Not that I'm counting. Just
come on, you like hanging out with us.
Meeting going forever.
What's that, Krista?
Forever.
Forever and ever.
That movie. It's from that movie. You just quoted it earlier. Forever.
From the Sandlot. Yeah.
What,
Ah,
really?
Forever.
What?
Or
What,
I was just
really?
playing
What,
off you, and you made me feel crazy.
what,
No. Not playing anymore.
what,
You're
what
returning the
scene?
favor now, Krista, to Dan.
All right,
What
all right, you're
scene?
going off the rails.
I don't remember that
All right,
quote.
there was an assignment for everybody. Go watch The Sandlot, report back at the next meeting, and let me know where the scene is. Okay.
got it for the minute.
Dan has a very good point, though. We have been on this topic for a very long time. It's all been a really good discussion. I think we definitely need to have it. Unfortunately, we didn't have a meeting last month. I wish we had, and we could have knocked out a bunch of this. Looking at the topics on the agenda, unless there's any critical items on buses and transportation related to this, I'm thinking of skipping over it unless anybody objects.
Just a quick comment. The DESA came out with some new guidelines. I think it was on Friday. Like I said, a quick comment. Next.
Okay. I guess if we're looking to, could we discuss it if we're looking to move to those newer guidelines? I guess, are we anticipating going to the closer spacing in the next couple weeks?
So here's what I could tell you. We've had people request changes in bus stops and changes from one cohort to another cohort. And what we've told people is, first few weeks of school, no, we're not making any changes because we got to get kids used to the routines. Then we'll look at making some changes. So what that means is, what it could mean is, one kid is now not on this bus, they're on that bus, those types of things based on these existing requests that we have in there. It could be that we're adding a few kids to some bus run and subtracting them from another bus run, those types of things. So that's what's in the works. So it could be that maybe there's going to be changes. It's not wholesale. It's not what we're saying, yep, we're now fitting 50 kids on a bus rather than 23 or 28 or whatever it is. It's not that. It's that we could see a couple being added in. In reality, that's just a
There's been a lot of juggling too of routes, and it seems like no sooner did they change a route today where there's a change in a cohort or a request for a change, and the route that was changed today, is no good anymore. So it's been a moving target. There have been a gazillion. You get my point. Requests. When we started back in January 19th, and they're still coming in. So we had given a deadline of like February 1st before we could make any changes. That could push back to the 8th, and now bus companies is trying to get things done for next Monday. So to be continued, Adam. How's that? And
Okay.
I need to have a conversation with the bus company as well. And again, just so that we're on the same page, this is not only home to school, but there's also sped as well, in the vans. And again, I don't know, and I don't know if it was this group or finance, but early in the year, we had to make some adjustments with sped transportation, and AA, who's our primary provider for in-district, made an adjustment and got some additional vehicles, transit vans, a little bit bigger, that helped us to transport students, but still remain within the guidelines. So this is impactful across the board, home to school and sped, in district and out of district as well.
Okay. All right. We've covered spacing in classrooms, other concerns. We've gone over, I think we can skip the decision matrix. We kind of discussed a lot of that already. Is there any issue with snow and ice since last time? I know there's just an issue then. Has everything been good?
Yeah, everything is
Okay.
good. It's all good. There was an issue, a big issue here in Holden. Spoke to DPW, and what I'm hearing is that the parking lot, especially over Davis Hill, is saturated, for lack of a better term, with salt and sand and whatever. So
Okay.
it's all
All right.
good.
For the remote stuff, I guess anything in particular that anybody wants to bring up under that. I know we had the internet outages over the last few weeks. I know that's something completely out of our control, but
So can I just jump on that
Sure.
for 1 minute? Who's got the stopwatch? Carolyn, you got the stopwatch. Oh, there we go. Okay. And I don't know, Adam, if this was Bob and I spoke about this today earlier. We had a problem last week. What day was it? Thursday, I think it was. And to make a really, really long story short, there was a hiccup with Chatter. You know, to use an analogy, they were looking to open up the information highway from 3 lanes to 10 lanes to bump it up to the 5 gig. And someone at their end screwed it up, and they thought we were looking to go from 10 lanes to 1 lane. And
of course.
just a minor problem. So speed up the story. Bob asked me to help out. I said, be my pleasure. Ended up talking to people in Florida, Georgia, I don't know, California, Albany, then back to Florida. And I pressed them a lot, if you will. Bob knows. Oh, it was great, Linda. It was an Academy Award, because at the end of the day, you know, this is gospel truth. No, I'm serious. This is gospel truth. At the end of the day, the technician got to central office 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he said to Bob or to Barry Sklar, he said, "You're all set, and please let Superintendent Didi know that you're all set." And I never said that I was a
Don't
superintendent.
correct them.
I didn't correct them. I never said I was a superintendent, but I think I scared the bejesus out of these guys. But hey, at the end of the day, I demanded an ETA. I got an ETA, and we were back and online. I mean, Carolyn, you're an end user. We were in 15 minutes, you know, for basically their major screw up, major screw up. And that's a whole separate. You don't want to be around for that meeting when I talk to them, or maybe you do. We can sell raffle tickets. But so that's what happened last week, and they as I say, some knucklehead thought that we were reversing it and going from 10 lanes to 1 lane. We're going from 3 lanes to the 10 lanes. So that's what happened, and we're all good. And again, coming back to what I had said earlier tonight, you know, kids have but 1 day until they have the next day. So that day was gone, but it was not a good day.
Yeah.
But it got
Wow.
fixed. It got fixed.
Good. 3 minutes. There you go. That's a Dan minute.
That's good.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. And it was super positive. And you were a hero in that story.
Yeah.
All of
You
them.
got a promotion.
No hero.
I mean,
No hero. Just doing
He
the
was.
job
He
that you're
was.
paying me. No, just doing the job.
Some of the other internet issues you've heard about have been resolved. So there's been some that were in affecting Naquag and Central Tree. We've taken care of those. We've increased the throughput to both those buildings. There was some problems in Sterling before that. That was part of the onboarding of the fiber. Those have been resolved. There's been some intermittent problems as well with some of the schools, and we're in the midst of figuring that out. In Thomas Prince, there was some issues with one wing, and we've narrowed that down, and that's being resolved this week. So, well, I think the message is, as we discover these different things, because we're using the network very intensely right now, throwing video and audio both directions constantly by every single person. As we discover them, we're resolving them as fast as we can. Sometimes we need to rally more troops, like to have Dan step up and help out with that. And that's what's happening behind the scenes. So we're fixing these things, and we're trying to fix them the right way rather than just put some bubble gum on it and hope that it doesn't break tomorrow. We're trying to fix things the right way, and sometimes that means spending just a little bit more money. But I think in the long run, it allows us to be frugal and not just cheap, which maybe costs us more in the long run. So that's the approach that we're taking with all these things.
Good. The only other things I had under remote right now was deployment of Chromebooks. I note, unless there's anything major on that, I'll kind of pass it over. So
I would say that by the end of this week, all the schools will have the Chromebooks for grade 8 students, and they'll be handing those out next week. 2 of the schools, I think it's Mount View and Choxet, have already done that. They got theirs a little bit earlier, but the rest of the schools have gotten theirs. They'll have them all by tomorrow. So we've made some good progress there. That'll mean that we are 1-to-1 once they're deployed to the students from grade 6 up through grade 12. That's a huge step forward for this year. Once we get the computers back from the kids that borrowed them, the borrowed computers, because they're getting a new one that's assigned directly to them. Once we get the borrowed ones back, we're reconfiguring those and getting those back into the elementary schools and starting to repopulate the carts that are down there. And those are needed, absolutely needed. So that's our plan of attack, and that's the way things are going there.
So if I could just jump in for a second, where's my timekeeper?
A second.
So just to go back to what we talked about an hour ago, when if one adult has COVID, how many are impacted by that one adult? And I had said, we had an issue in central office, and 10 people were impacted. To Bob's point, to make all that work and how we're all working together. And that's the point I'm trying to make here, is how we're all working together. Barry is looking to get this equipment from Amazon, or it has worked through Amazon to get this equipment. As you might imagine, we have a credit limit with Amazon. I'm also looking to expand our online ordering with Amazon to speed up the story. Barry's got a game plan, Bob's got a game plan, and they say, well, how are we going to make this thing work? And we've only got this amount, and so we get our credit limit. I'm not going to tell you what the number is because you'll fall off your chair, but it's good. It's good. We tripled the credit limit to make it happen. Of course, I'm on the hook for it, but that's beside the point.
Brave man.
It's his signature.
That's all I'm saying, is that we're working as a unit, and some of these things are easy and some aren't. But I just want to share that vignette as to how each one of us has a part in enabling the success of the kids in the classroom, and that's what we're all about.
Thanks. The other thing on the remote was what do we got? 1:34. Getting better. Was teacher IT equipment. A lot of I think all the teachers have Chromebooks and all that. And from what I've been hearing, and I think what we're really finding out is, for what the teachers need to do for these kind of classes, doing a video chat and present and run whatever program and show that it's not necessarily working on Chromebooks. And just as we move forward with our IT purchases in the future, I guess keep that in mind, to really expand the teacher's ability with laptops or whatever it is, because the Chromebooks have been a bit of a hindrance for them.
So, Adam, what I'll share with you is that this hit us in the face the very first week that we came back into hybrid. The teachers have, by and large, old, crappy desktops that were being thrown out by WPI, and we've since had them for 4, 5, 6 years in some cases in these teachers' hands. So you can imagine how old they are. They had Chromebooks that were never intended to host this many live video feeds at the same time, and don't have the video card to process that. It's just not what we bought those things for. So what we've done in a very short time, and it was all dependent on what Dan put into play there to increase our ability to order directly through Amazon, we've ordered 250 desktop computers, and 200 of those have already come in and have been deployed. The remaining 50 showed up today, and they're going to be deployed by the end of the week. So that's changing over 250 teachers' workstations in a very short time so that they can better do just what we're asking them to do. Host a meeting, be online, have this microphone there, have your video camera, do all these types, use this program, watch the kids that are in front of you, watch the kids that are remote. All those things happen. So that's what we have in play. And this is something that maybe is a little scary for the typical business manager in a typical year, but once we made the case, I mean, Dan put it into play, and that's one thing I'd like to brag about is how quickly this thing turned around. But this was a gotta do. We couldn't have teachers just, what the hell? I got this old crappy stuff in my room, and you expecting me to be doing all this. We had to move quickly, and that was to help morale, but also to help teachers just function better. And so that's a really good thing that came out of this. I think this is embedded in this sort of tough times are some really good stories that have been in here, and this is one of them.
Good. That's for me. I wish we had coordinated. I would have opened better, But no, that's good. I mean, like I had heard about it at my Simco meeting, and that was almost a month ago now. That they were having significant issues. So that is really good to hear. Excellent. Anything else on remote? Anybody?
Yeah, just one more thing.
Yep.
The drum roll.
Go for it.
She's timing. She's timing.
The recent hiring of the tech integration specialist. They're rock stars, and they've hit the road running, and they've jumped into the deep end, and they've not waded into the water at all. And no, they weren't in the original budget. Okay, they're a byproduct of the district's response to COVID. But I think it was the appropriate response to COVID, and they're hitting grand slams. It's spring training in a couple days. So that's my baseball analogy. We've gone from cars to baseball. All right. Did I miss anything with those guys, Bob?
I think to Dan's point, though, it's been brought up at the full committee about when you're going to look at bringing back the tier 2 reductions. And that's teachers that are in there. There's custodians in there. There's administrators in there. There's secretaries in there, custodians that are in there. What we've done is we've internally looked at that. So that's a pool of money that we would have been spending on salaries that we're not. These two salaries right here are an example of things that we're saying, look, this is a bigger need right now than it was ever before. And this is a gotta do. So we're going to spend some of that money we've got in reserve on these positions and fill them right now. We had this in our plans for down the road, but it suddenly became a absolute gotta do. We have to support people and answer their questions and train them up, and they got to feel that we're there to have their back when they're out there trying to teach the kids. So this is an example of how we've sort of tapped the brakes on bringing people back because we're figuring out what our immediate needs are right now, and this is good to have that money in reserve to be able to bring these people on board immediately. And as Dan also mentioned in there, 2 new hires. And for once, I'm proud that we didn't just hire the cheapest people, we hired the best people. Because in this case, we need 2 independent people that are self-motivated and can get out there and just help us out. Not 2 people that, oh, you know, I got to drag this person around and show them this and show them that. And so this has been a good move by the district.
Good, good. I mean, just to, I guess, jump on the bandwagon here, but, you know, going back to that Simcoe meeting I had, you know, it's just good to be able to get that direct feedback. But, you know, while there was a lot of issues that were brought up about IT and tech and things like that, and using it and it working, and the slowdowns and all that, I mean, they still wanted to emphasize that, you know, the tech support was excellent. I mean, the people that are out there helping them, I think it was Dan was their tech guy who was in that week or whatever. He was all over the place and helping everybody, and they were really thankful and really appreciative of it, because they're struggling, you know, to jump in. And this was within a couple of weeks of opening.
Yeah.
So, you know, jump in, it's opening, trying to figure out all these issues, such and such isn't working, and he shows up, helps you fix it, and then he's gone to the next place, and he's helping everybody. So they definitely, the IT support staff across the board has been excellent. Krista.
So my question is, I think Linda actually had her hand up.
I missed Linda. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Or either one. Krista, go ahead. You're unmuted.
All right. So my question is, this is fantastic. It sounds like a lot of really good progress has been made, and I'm just wondering, you know, maybe I missed it. I was just like too excited about the info. Did the teachers report back that it was that they're all feeling more confident? Because I know that there were some teachers feeling not so confident in teaching remotely or hybrid.
Krista, that's still the challenge, and it shows it shows itself in a couple of fronts. We've had people that have interacted with the new tech integration specialists, who are teachers, by the way. They've had great feedback, unsolicited, to Daryl, myself, to Dan, to the Barry Scalar in charge of tech, just how proud they are and how happy they are that we have people on staff now that are helping them and can answer their questions and resolve issues they've had. We've also got people that are not aware that folks are around, or how to get them in their classroom, those types of things. And so in some cases, and I saw it in Carolyn's document that she shared with us, people, for instance, saying, yeah, I had to purchase my own microphone. We've ordered a ton of things, including microphones that attach to your computer, but also microphones that are wireless that can sit over there and pick things up. I think people just aren't quite aware of this. So the message we need to get is they don't have to be aware of it. If they need something, they need to go talk to their principal rather than just do it themselves. And the principals are the ones that can connect the people up with whoever it needs to be. There's a lot of resources we're bringing into play, but as I mentioned, even with the laptops, this stuff's happening so fast that a couple of weeks ago, no, we didn't have that. Now we do, you know? So they got to work through their principals. That's got to be the message that we give everybody, is reach out to your principal first. And you know, that's how it is right now. Yeah, we need to do a little bit better job with communicating that, and we certainly will.
And the principals are definitely getting the point across that they are the people to come to if teachers need anything, because if they're not announcing that out there, those teachers might also miss that point.
Yep, we got to work with those principals as well. And the other thing we're always trying to provide is, so maybe you're not comfortable with me and I'm your principal because maybe Bob's always negative or something, and you're like, I just can't ask him that. We're trying to provide avenues so people can still request things around the edges. So for instance, with technology, it's a help desk. It doesn't have to be my computer's broken. It's, hey, I need a microphone kind of thing. That's all you got to say. Or you might not even know what it is you need. I need to be able to walk around my classroom and still talk to the kids at home. Help me out. Just put something in there. So that's what we have to recircle back to that and do a better job communicating that out to everybody. So yeah, you're right.
I would say that's a very positive message. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, thanks. Linda, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump to Carolyn because I think she's some direct comment on that.
Yeah, I do think teachers are feeling a lot more prepared and supported. I think the comment about the principals is, I think in general, teachers know to go to principals. I do worry sometimes that principals are overwhelmed. So even if an issue gets brought to them, maybe it doesn't, maybe the follow-up doesn't always happen. Not necessarily through any fault of their own. So we've really been encouraging teachers to go to principals with issues. And then if it doesn't, if you don't hear anything about it, like you never heard about a plexiglass barrier, then go ahead and maybe contact Bob or Jim Cavello. And in terms of the technology, some of the things with technology is maybe people bought their own before realizing that something was available. Or some teachers are, wanting to buy a certain kind. But I do agree with Bob in terms of making sure everybody is aware of what is available to them. And just kind of really having that communication be first and foremost.
Excellent. Thanks. Linda, thank you for being patient.
Patience is not one of my strong suits, so I will take that compliment. Thank you. No. So I had a question. I think Krista's question actually answered it. If these tech integration specialists are helping teachers out with, it's not just like IT help, it's also like how to integrate, I want to do this activity, how am I going to make it work on Seesaw? Or how am I going to, is it that kind of level?
Linda, that's a great question. The tech integration specialist's primary job is to help the teacher use technology to support students, to engage students, to transfer the lessons that they used to do in person to a remote screen. It's those types of things. They will eventually know some of the details of, hey, I'm in Seesaw and I can't print to this or save there. They might not know that right now, but eventually they will. What they do know now is who our technicians are, our technology technicians, and they can come out because my machine's running slow, or guess what, I need a webcam, and they'll come out and install it. So they can be a middle person to connect up those types of situations and just get them to work. Anything we can do right now to smooth out the speed bumps and just have people kind of roll a little smoother is really what we need to do. And that's what they're there to do. Their primary job, though, is around teaching and learning. That's why they're teachers that we hired, not just somebody that knows laptops or something. It has to be someone that understands how to use an application or a device or some hardware to better reach kids, to better make the lesson stick, to engage kids a little bit more. That's why it was essential to get these guys in and not just two more technicians.
That's great. That's fantastic. I like that. I like that vision of looking ahead like that, not just filling what is right in front of us at the moment, but where could it go? So then my other question though, since you mentioned about how the full committee brings this up sometimes too, looking at where those savings from the tiers, if we had a document to look at where those trade-offs are, that I think is where a lot of the questions come from. If there's a way to see, where that decision making is happening, where there's, because it comes down to how we're making the district run, right? So if we're hiring these two necessary positions, it's out of these other cuts. So seeing that kind of offset each other, I think would be really helpful in clarifying what the committee has been looking for? I know I've been looking for it.
Well, I walked finance at our last meeting. Off the top of my head, a couple weeks ago we had like a $4 million unencumbered balance in our salary account, and again, because of these positions. But then I walked them through roughly about $3 million in estimated expenditures, and I can tell you right now, 300,000 were for sub teachers because we can't encumber our day-to-day subs. There was 500,000 that was allocated for I guess new positions or a combination of vacancies that hadn't been filled in new positions, and there were contractual obligations that a couple contracts, as you all well know, that either are still in motion or just got resolved. So when it was all said and done, I think the estimated balance was, and again, this was a couple weeks ago, so the numbers have clearly changed. Was 1 million plus in change. And I actually did run a report. I did this again going back to finance of all of our FTEs. I had spoken to Daryl about this. I think Member Mills had asked about this an FTE report for FY21, and I had segregated it out. But where Mr. Carlson and I are gonna work on, there's a follow-up question, which I think is this here for the next meeting. We'll have that information for you.
Linda, we absolutely will work towards that. And I think maybe just a quick, maybe some cliff notes on all that. We have the 2 technology integration specialists, and we have 3 elementary counselors that we've posted. So those are the 5 positions that are in there. And I'm not quite sure exactly where we were costing the building subs. Not someone you'd bring in for a day-to-day sub, but this is someone that's a full-time employee that's there every single day. If those are applied to the building sub account, or if they might be considered part of this using the money we saved from the tier 2 cuts. But at least those 5 positions, the tech integration specialists and the 3 elementary counselors could be considered that's a more immediate need than what we had reduced in that section.
So in those building subs, again, like the high school, I think was looking to hire or has hired like three bodies, and then the other buildings we're looking to bring on 2. It's $150 a day, and now we're really getting into the weeds, but they would be classified under long-term subs. And again, I'm talking about my end of the year report, which again, we're really getting off topic here, but if nothing else, we would be inflating the expenditures in the day-to-day subs. That's all. But that wasn't budgeted, and again, that's in response to COVID, because we can't get subs in the building. And there's also the nurse manager as well. We talked about that today, Bob, at staff meeting, and we're not having any luck with that. But that's out there again. That's being posted. That was in the budget for FY21, and I think it was actually Member Mills who had advocated for that, and we put it in there. And again, we're just having a tough time getting bodies for certain positions, but that's not unusual, across the board, except when it comes time for my assistant business manager. I had to throw that in there. I had to say it. Sorry, just had to say it.
All right. I'm gonna try to get us back on track for a second. Mike, all you missed was Dan trying to get us back on the agenda and then immediately veering off of it. Other than that, no, we're good.
Wow, I'm feeling the love.
So
I take some of that blame.
yeah, maybe. Okay, so I'd like to wrap up remote, hybrid, and actually logistics issues. We've touched a lot of it just under the other 2. unless anybody has any issues with that. Linda, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I can
Nope.
do this outside of the meeting. I just had a question about availability of clear masks, and I had asked about double masking. I'm just because that's been kind of out in recommendations, but recently I've seen no more mention of that. So maybe that's one of those recommendations that's falling out of favor. But just availability of clear masks, if they're useful, if they're available, if people want them, can they have them? That sums that question up.
Linda, anybody that's requested any specific type of mask that works better for them based on their job, we've ordered those. We ordered some clear masks and the window was too small. We ordered some other ones and there was some other issue that they didn't fit tight enough. So we've tried to keep up with that stuff there. There could be somebody that says, hey, I don't have the mask I wanted. Some people ask for specific brand names, and that just becomes a chore when we're trying to buy larger quantities, not just like 5 or 25 of something. So we try to get what we can. So as far as I know, we've moved on those types of things. There's nobody that said, no, you can't get this or that. There's face shields. We've ordered different styles and types of face shields based on people and what their job descriptions are, what they have to do, and those types of things. And
Thank you.
sure.
All right. Just to let everybody know, I'm not necessarily going to entertain a motion to extend this meeting past 10. I would like to talk about the FEMA update. But Mike, did you have a question on this topic?
I was just wondering where we were on the agenda right now.
We're still under COVID-19, trying to wrap it up.
Okay.
We
Can I ask real quick
bounced around a bit.
about the double masking thing? Because I took my headphones off for a second, so I might have missed that. Is that a thing? I know it's a thing, but are we?
That's not something we're moving forward with. We discussed it. We talked over it internally, and it's just not where we are right now. We've talked and given some advice to people that had concerns about some of the disposable masks not fitting as tightly, and if the side straps are twisted and put over the ears, it pulls it tighter against people's cheeks and that type of thing. So we've given some guidance around that to people that have asked about it. We have extra cloth masks available if anyone wants one of those to put over their mask. That's something we'll probably re-communicate out to everybody, but we have a couple thousand of those, like 6,000 or something. So we could get those out, and they're washable, and so they could be reused over the disposable mask type of thing. And
Well, I think that's great, and I think that a lot of families do have masks of their own. So if they're using a disposable one at school and then putting theirs on over that, would that be a solution that we could probably suggest to people that is reasonable? And
we're letting parents sort of decide if they're sending a kid in with a mask that they like or they wear or has a style or whatever. We're not telling them they have to put a disposable napkin over it. We're leaving that in their hands. For staff that have inquired, we do have a way that they can double mask. Most of the inquiries I've gotten is just around they don't feel it fits tight enough on the side, and so when they exhale and breathe in, they feel it coming around the nose and across and so we found that's a simple solution there. But we do have cloth masks, and so I'll get that out to our staff again. In terms of kids, we're trying to get them to tolerate wearing the mask as long as they can during the school day, and so we're not mandating double or anything else with them.
One, please. Just at least wear one. Yeah.
There you go. That's it.
All right. Mike, can we make it quick?
Yeah. Do all of the grade levels have mask breaks?
Yes.
Or how? Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So I'd like to move on. Dan, the next two are yours, really. I'd like to take it out of order, actually, and talk about the FEMA update, because I feel like we're not going to have time to dedicate to the capital plan anyway.
So happy to do that. But what I'd like to do is I would just like to, if I may, Adam, just show the committee real quick what the capital plan looks like, and then we can tackle this. And my recommendation is that if we have a meeting in the next 2 weeks thereabouts, so we allocate probably a good hour to talk about the capital plan. So I'm just going to literally show it to you so you can see it.
Okay.
Just give me a second to put it up there on the screen.
And while Dan's doing that, we met quickly today and kind of reviewed and modified a few minor things that were on there. But this is something that still we're trying to get a little closer with in terms of dollar amounts and priorities and all those types of things.
So this is a 10-year plan that goes out to FY30. And I've broken it out by each building, and I prioritize in FY21, which is basically the horses out of the barn, so to speak, in FY22 of the projects. What are the important ones? I'm just going to go down to the bottom. And scrolling here real quickly, and you're going to see that the big priority this year, which would probably be brought forward into next year, are security systems. My notes here is that I'm suggesting that depending upon where we land at the end of FY21, that we might be able to use some of our leftover money in 21 to tackle some of these projects. And you can see, and I know I'm going through this real fast, I know that. That security cameras and security systems is pretty much across the board in a lot of our buildings. That's without doubt. And then in FY22, the number one priority in 22 is to address the bathroom issues over at Dawson. We're looking at almost $170,000. But they have a huge bathroom issue over there for both students and staff. That is just that's first and foremost. And then secondly, in FY22, again, address the carpeting over at Houghton and Chalkset, and that's a top priority. And then number three is a phone system in a couple of buildings, addressing the phone system issue. I think this came up earlier at PCS. Again, I mentioned this when we were talking about the issue with the high school, that there is a building or two that has a PA system issue, and PCS has an issue that we're looking to address in FY22 if we can. And then down the bottom, what I've done. And again, we'll talk much more about this, at our next meeting. I've given you totals for over the 10 years of, what it would cost, for each cost center, if you will. ECC central office, almost 2.6, food service $20,000, and that comes out of their budget. All the elementary schools just under $3 million. The middle schools almost 6.3, high school 6.3, and then the K through 8 845. And these are fluid numbers. That's my term, but based upon market conditions, based upon labor, based upon materials, etc. But if again, my takeaway from here is that I wanted you just to see, oh wow, look at that. And that's real fancy. It's color coded and everything else. Like wow. You do
have
we
5 minutes for FEMA.
I'm sorry.
You only have 5 minutes for FEMA.
Okay, so we're moving on from here.
Okay, it's awesome. It is really good, and I'm excited to go over it at the next meeting.
The update. Go ahead, Bob.
A reality might be, Adam, and everybody else, that it's not necessarily the order of when we're doing projects and all that. The reality might be that we're going to really need some help. Like, for instance, Dan talked about the number one priority being the bathrooms at Dawson. How do we make that happen? Do we have to have a meeting with the town manager? Do we need to get somebody to come into the building with you guys or something? Do you guys want to see it in the building? So that's kind of where we need some help, is how do we once we sort of work through the whole plan, how do we then put the top priority things into action? Because what we saw this year was nobody had a taste for anything, and everything was sort of, no, not this year. Bathrooms at Dawson, that's a gotta do. I mean, you can't have 2 bathrooms for the entire school and see the lines of kids, and oh my goodness, it's rough over there. So that's where we need your help to kind of work with us and brainstorm how we're gonna get some traction on this sucker, you know.
Okay. Yep.
FEMA, on February 10th, I received notification along with every municipality in the Commonwealth from my rep at FEMA that the feds have relaxed the standards, and now they're looking to reimburse at 100% of all eligible costs, and that's a change from the previous administration that was at 75%. Now it's 100%. And again, this is retroactive going back to a year ago, January 20 of 2020, when COVID began through this fall, September 30 of 2021. That's the good news. I guess the bad news, if you will, is that there is no closure yet on our application. As you all know, we talked about this. We've got an application in for just under 130,000, 129 and change. But the good news is that by also increasing the potential value of reimbursement to 100%, which is great, they've also expanded the windows. So, for example, the HVAC work that's been done that Bob couldn't put through in a grant, or that might still be sitting in school choice, or it is sitting in the general fund. Those types of projects or that work is going to be in my next application with them. And we'll keep our fingers crossed in terms of the reimbursement. So, you know, it's been, whatever it's been, 6 months plus since that application was submitted. It'll still probably be a while, but you know, that's not going to deter me from submitting another application for the other work. We won't see that money this fiscal year. I doubt it. And this is from the Biden administration. This is not tied up in the, you know, the $1 trillion package that the president's trying to get through Congress. You know, where it's tied up is I think FEMA and MEMA just getting their ducks properly lined up. And moving these applications through. And just an FYI, you know, Congressman McGovern's office has been in contact with me, and they've communicated to me that they're overseeing, you know, the process and looking out for what's used, and I appreciate that. Again, once the Biden administration gets all their ducks properly lined up, you know, we'll hopefully see some activity on our application. So that's good news, you know, and we'll see. We'll probably see the money this fiscal year, but probably not to the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
Any questions on that? And that was in, I didn't
That was
see
good. That was like 3 minutes. That
I was going to say, I didn't see the clock ticking.
Those were real minutes too, not Dan minutes. So
Yeah.
I don't have any questions. That's all good news. You know, the lag time in it's a little frustrating, but the fact that it's opened up to 100%, and you know, we can submit another application for more items. That's really good news for us. So
Yeah.
Unless there's any other comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. So in lieu of the Dan drinking game I invented just now, you know, where it's all just metaphors and saying it's only going to be a minute. I'd like to run through a roll call vote. Mike.
Yes.
Linda.
Yes.
And Krista.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Thanks for sticking with me, everyone. This was a long meeting, but it was good. So thank you.
Nice job, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, take
Take
care.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, did
Thanks,
the
Adam.
recording stop?
I'm going to
Yeah,
text
thanks.
Dan right now.